Welcome to my channel. Today we're diving into 5 creepy true online dating horror stories that will make you think twice before swiping right. These aren't just ghosted dates. They're stories that chill to the core. Watch till the end, you've been warned. It started with a swipe. Maya hadn't dated in over 2 years. Not since the breakup with Daniel, who had once seemed like the perfect man until his temper flared one too many times. Therapy helped, and so did time. And now, on a drizzly Friday night with her cat curled up beside her and a cup of jasmine tea steaming on the nightstand, she felt ready, tentatively ready, but ready nonetheless. Her thumb hovered over the Tinder icon for a moment before she tapped it. She wasn't looking for a soulmate. Not yet. Just someone to talk to, someone kind. Someone who didn't set off the quiet alarms her gut had grown used to hearing. She set up her profile quickly, choosing a few modest photos. One at the bookstore, one hiking, another at a wedding. Her bio was short but genuine. Lover of stories, tea, and everything autumn. Looking to meet someone down to earth. The matches came slowly, a trickle rather than a flood. Most were the usual type. Overconfident smiles, shirtless mirror pics, bios full of sarcasm or nothing at all. She swiped left again and again, until she came across one that gave her pause. His name was Carter, mid-30s, dark brown hair, soft eyes, clean cut. His pictures showed him in well-lit, ordinary places. A park bench with a book, cooking with his golden retriever beside him. Standing in front of what looked like a small independent theater. His bio read, bookworm, weekend chef, and seeker of quiet adventures. Let's make something beautiful. She paused. Read it again. It was nice, thoughtful. She stared at his face for a long moment. Nothing flashy. Just something solid, safe. She swiped right. They matched instantly. Within seconds, a message appeared. Hey Maya. Your profile made me smile. Simple. Not pushy. She replied with a thank you, and the conversation grew from there. They messaged for over an hour that night, their chat peppered with literary references and favorite meals and shared thoughts on how city life was both a comfort and a cage. By the time she said goodnight, she felt something warm blooming in her chest. Hope, maybe or excitement. Over the next few days they talked constantly, first through the app, then over text, and eventually over the phone. His voice was even better than she imagined. Low, calm, steady. Like a radio host or someone you'd trust to read you a bedtime story. They shared so much so quickly. He told her about his job. Freelance editor, mostly working from home, and his childhood in a small town upstate. She told him about her work in the library archives and her volunteer shifts at the local animal shelter. He asked thoughtful questions. Remembered small details. One night, he sent her a picture of a worn first edition of Jane Eyre, saying it reminded him of her. A week later, he asked if she wanted to meet in person. Her stomach fluttered at the thought, but she said yes. They arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop halfway between their neighborhoods. She arrived early, as always, clutching a novel and scanning the room. When he walked in, she felt a weird sense of déjà vu, as if she'd already lived this moment. Carter looked exactly like his pictures, down to the gentle curve of his smile. Maya? He asked, and when she nodded, he leaned in for a brief, polite hug. They talked for hours. About everything. Time slipped past until the baristas started stacking chairs and wiping down counters. Outside, the streets were dark and wet with mist, streetlights casting golden halos on the sidewalk. He offered to walk her home. She hesitated, then agreed. They talked along the way, about the books they saw in the store windows, about a podcast he loved, about how quiet the city felt after midnight. When they reached her building, he stopped. I had a really nice time, he said. Me too. There was a moment of silence between them, soft and full. He smiled again. I'd like to see you again. She nodded, almost shyly. I'd like that too. Over the next few weeks, they grew closer. He never pressured her. Always let her set the pace. He didn't push for anything too fast. She appreciated that he'd cook for her at his place, usually something elaborate and comforting. Risottos, soups, Homemade bread. He lived alone in a charming brownstone with ivy curling along the outer walls and thick bookshelves lining every room. But there were moments, small ones, that made her pause. Like how he never let her explore his house beyond the living room and kitchen. Or how he got oddly quiet when she asked about his family. And the one time she reached for a cabinet handle and he suddenly stood beside her, blocking her with a too casual laugh. "That's just storage," he said quickly. "Honestly, it's a mess." Another time he said something that made her pause. They were watching an old Hitchcock movie, and he turned to her and said, "It's fascinating how easily people disappear these days. Cities are like oceans. You drop something deep enough, no one ever finds it." She laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke. His eyes lingered on her a little too long. That night, she left early, said she had work. Her gut wasn't screaming, but it was whispering. She began paying more attention. She Googled him. Not obsessively, but enough to confirm what he told her. His editing profile was real, though it hadn't been updated in years. His LinkedIn was minimal. No social media, no tagged photos. She tried looking up his name alongside his supposed hometown, but found nothing. Conclusive. No wedding photos, no mentions in local papers, no high school yearbook hits. When she asked him why he didn't use social media, he shrugged. "Too noisy, too fake. That I like real connections." She couldn't argue with that. Still, something tugged at her. The tipping point came one Thursday night. She had dropped by unannounced with a bottle of wine and some cinnamon rolls she'd picked up from her favorite bakery. A small surprise. She still had a key he'd given her 2 weeks earlier, when he'd said, "In case you ever want to come over when I'm out." She rang the bell, then tried the KEY.IT. Didn't work. Strange. She texted him, "Hey, I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd surprise you with wine and sweets, but my key's not working?" A minute later, the door opened. Carter stood there, looking off. His smile was forced, his eyes a little too wide. "Maya," he said, "didn't know you were coming." She held up the wine, trying to mask her unease. "Just a surprise visit." There was a pause. Then he stepped aside. "Of course, come in." The house felt different, colder, darker. There were no candles lit, no soft jazz playing like usual, and there was a faint smell, like bleach or something stronger. She stepped inside cautiously. "I was just cleaning," he said. "Didn't expect company." He reached for the wine, and their hands brushed. His palm was damp. She glanced around. The hallway that always seemed closed off now had a door slightly ajar. She glanced toward it instinctively. His voice was sharp. "Not there." She froze. "Sorry," she said, stepping back. That he forced a chuckle. "No worries. Just messy back there." He ushered her into the living room, poured them both a glass. But he didn't drink, just sat there watching her sip, his fingers tapping against his knee. They barely talked. The tension was thick. After 10 minutes, she stood. "I think I should go. Early morning tomorrow." He didn't argue as he walked her to the door. He touched her arm gently. "You trust me, right?" The question came out of nowhere. She blinked. "What? You trust me?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, of course." His eyes searched hers. "Good." She left without looking back. Walked the few blocks quickly, every shadow on the street suddenly ominous. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over every small moment, every oddity. She felt like she was missing something, a pattern just out of reach. 3:12 a.m. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carter. "I'm sorry if I scared you. I really like you, Maya." She didn't reply. Not right away. The next morning, she called in sick to work and did what she'd avoided for weeks, deep research. She tried his name with new combinations, forums, missing persons sites, public record lookups. Hours passed, and then she found it. A thread buried deep in a subreddit about strange encounters. The title was simple. "I dated a man named Carter in 2019. Something wasn't right." Her heart pounded as she clicked. The poster, anonymous, described a man eerily similar, same name, same look, Same behaviors. The editing job. The nice house. The thoughtful gestures. The too perfect first few weeks. Then the distance. The strange remarks. The blocked-off areas of the home. The last post in the thread was a warning. If you're dating a man named Carter who lives in Brooklyn and says he's a freelance editor, be careful. I tried to report him once and no one believed me. But something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. Maya stared at the screen, heart thundering. She copied the username. Searched. Nothing. She posted a reply that I think I'm dating him now. Please message me. The screen blinked at no reply. That user hadn't posted in 4 years. That's when she heard the knock at soft, deliberate her front door. It was 5:43 p.m. She hadn't told anyone where she lived. She froze. Another knock. This time louder. Her phone vibrated again. A text. You didn't respond. I wanted to see you. Can we talk? She stepped toward the window, slowly drawing the curtain. He was standing there, outside, smiling. But something in his eyes was cold, empty. She turned off the lights, heart racing. She backed away from the window and grabbed her phone with trembling fingers. She started to dial 911. Then she heard the doorknob twist. The doorknob stopped turning just as the dispatcher picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Maya backed further into the hallway, her voice a tight whisper. There's a man outside my door. His name is Carter. I think he followed me. He was my boyfriend and I don't know what he's doing here. Is he trying to get inside? He just tried the doorknob. I think he has a key. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold the phone. The dispatcher asked for her address. Maya gave it, her eyes never leaving the door. An officer is on the way. Are your doors locked? Yes. I think, yes. But he might have a key I didn't give him. Stay on the line with me. Okay? Don't hang up. Another knock. Slower this time. 3 calm taps. Like he was enjoying it. Maya, came Carter's voice, muffled through the wood. I just want to talk. She crouched behind the couch, nearly gagging from the pressure in her chest. I saw your light go off. That I know you're home. The dispatcher's voice stayed level. Officers are en route. Oh, not engage with him. Is there a back exit? No, Maya whispered. Top floor apartment. Just one stairwell. There was silence outside. For a moment she thought he might have left. Her hopes surged, just a flicker, until she heard the slow squeak of the mailbox flap being pulled open. Then came his voice again. You don't have to be afraid of me, but you should be afraid of people online. Maya, you don't really know who anyone is. The flap clicked shut. Then silence. The dispatcher asked, Is he still there? I don't know. I think he's gone. Don't check yet. Just wait. Officers are almost there. Maya nodded, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Every second crawled. A few minutes later, there was a knock again, but sharper, followed by voices, real ones. This is NYPD, miss, can you open the door? She bolted upright, unlocked the deadbolt, and cracked the door. 2 uniformed officers were outside. She swung the door wide and nearly collapsed. They didn't find Carter. The officers swept the building, checked security cameras, questioned the neighbors, but there was no trace of him. Maya told them everything. About the visits, the unworking key, the man she thought she knew. She even showed them the Reddit post. One of the officers, a younger woman named Torres, took her aside as the other canvassed the building. Do you still have his number? She asked gently. Yes. Don't block it. If he contacts you again, we can track the signal. But do not answer. Just forward us anything he sends. Maya nodded. Do you think he's dangerous? Torres hesitated. I think he's not who you thought he was. That night, Maya didn't sleep. Not even in daylight. The following day, she stayed with her friend Riley in Queens. Riley was sharp, no nonsense, a criminal psychology grad student with a soft heart and a watchful eye. You're not going back there until we know who this guy really is, she said. Maya didn't argue. Together, they dug deeper. They tried every variation of Carter's name she could remember. first and last, reversed, abbreviated, stylized. Riley even used academic databases, old newspaper archives, and reverse image searches on his photos. Most of the pictures turned up nothing. 1 or 2 brought up grainy results on obscure blogs, but they were dead links. Then Riley froze. Come here. She had found a photo, Carter in what looked like a college party, arms around 2 other people, his smile unmistakable. But the blog wasn't about the party at IT. It was an old post from a woman who ran a small true crime blog, focusing on missing persons and unsolved mysteries. The title read, The Vanishing of Evan Black, a Smile That Disappeared. Maya read every line with a sick twist in her stomach. Evan Black had vanished in 2015. Last seen by a woman he was casually dating. She'd described him as charming, articulate, intelligent. A bookish guy who worked in publishing. After a few weeks of dating, he disappeared from her life completely. The kicker. Other women had come forward with similar stories in nearby towns. He would vanish, sometimes after weeks, sometimes months. None of the women were hurt, but all of them recalled the same patterns. Closed doors, mysterious storage areas, disappearing without a trace. The blog had theories, witness protection, mental illness, or even an elaborate con. But what stood out was one quote from a girl in Vermont. He gave me a key once, then it stopped working. When I asked, he told me, some things are meant to stay locked. Maya sat back, heart stammering. That was nearly verbatim what Carter had said. Could be a different guy? Riley offered, but her tone lacked conviction. Maya knew. She could feel it in her bones. She sent the link to Officer Torres immediately. The next day, Torres replied, We're looking into this. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your phone charged. I'll update you. 2 days passed. Nothing from Carter. Then, on the 3rd day, Maya received a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A physical letter. Hand. Delivered at NO stamped NO return address. Slipped under Riley's apartment door. Her name was written on the front in careful cursive. Inside. A single sheet of paper. You're very good at pretending to care. But I see now you were never really listening. That's okay. I found someone else. Someone who actually understands me. Take care, Maya, and remember, curiosity is a dangerous thing. Maya dropped the letter like it burned. Riley called Torres immediately. Officers came, dusted for prints, and took the letter as evidence. But there were no usable prints. Nothing identifiable. That night, Riley kept every window shut and the door barricaded. Maya didn't argue. Over the next week, nothing happened. NO texts, NO sightings, NO strange knocks. Life tried to return to normal, but Maya couldn't sleep without double-checking every lock. She quit online dating for good. She couldn't bear to look at a profile without seeing Carter's too perfect smile. 3 weeks later, she received a call. It was Torres. We found something, she said. The woman had gone missing 2 towns over. Tessa Rowan, 29, dog walker, book lover. She had recently started dating a man named Jonas, but friends described him as bookish, smart, charming. His photos matched Carter, different name, same face. When police searched the woman's last known location, her apartment, they found signs of struggle, NO blood, NO forced entry. But the back door lock had been changed recently. Torres didn't say it outright, but Maya could tell. Tessa might be gone for good. We're pulling surveillance now. If this guy shows up again, we'll find him. Do you have his real name? Still working on it. If he's using aliases, he's been careful. Really careful. But someone that meticulous? He'll make a mistake eventually. Maya hung up, shaken. That night, she had a nightmare. She was back in Carter's house, wandering hallways she'd never seen, opening doors that creaked like they hadn't been opened in years. Every room had a locked cabinet. Every locked cabinet was warm. Something behind them, breathing. She woke in a sweat, heart racing. Riley's cat hissing in the corner for no reason. But the worst part wasn't the dream. It was the voicemail she found waiting on her phone. NO number. NO transcript. Just audio. A single line, whispered in that low, velvety voice she once trusted. People always wonder how the story ends. Maya. The truth is, Sometimes it never does. Maya didn't listen to the voicemail again. She couldn't. The sound of his voice, calm, intimate, eerily composed, made her skin crawl. She deleted it, but knew full well that it likely still existed somewhere in her phone's cloud backup. That realization disturbed her more than she cared to admit. Torres followed up the next day. No luck tracing the call? Unlisted burner, she said. Could have been anywhere, no repeat signal yet. But we're flagging all similar activity in the system. Maya asked the obvious question. Why would he send a voicemail now? Torres was quiet for a moment. Then, some people, they don't like being ignored. He might want your attention back. Or maybe this is part of a cycle. A cycle? Stalking behavior. Push and pull. Contact, vanish, reappear. It's less about you personally, more about how you respond. I'm not responding. Good. Keep it that way. Maya tried. She really did. She went back to work, resumed shelving rare books at the archives, scanning old donation records and answering quiet questions from retired professors and students with fading curiosity. IT should have been a comfort. A return to structure, routine, but something had shifted. Every time the door creaked, she flinched. Every time the lights flickered, her breath caught. Even in crowds, she scanned faces, searching for that too familiar expression. Soft smile, warm eyes, the illusion of safety. She took the long way home now. Avoided the direct bus line, never traveled alone after dark, and always, kept her pepper spray within reach. Riley made sure of that. Still, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. One evening, about 2 weeks after the voicemail, she stayed late at the archive. The head librarian had gone home early, and Maya volunteered to lock up. The building was old, thick with stone and ivy. The smell of time pressed into every inch. The front windows stretched from ceiling to floor, letting the dying golden light stream in. She was in the back, sealing the last box of donated journals, when she heard it, a tap, then another. Not at the front, the side door. The one nobody used. The one that hadn't opened properly in years. She froze. The tapping stopped. She waited, holding her breath, ears straining for any sound. Then a knock, clear, deliberate, and only once. She grabbed her phone and called Riley on instinct. "It's me," she whispered. "What's wrong?" "I think someone's outside." "The side door." "Are you alone?" "Yes. I'm coming to get you. Don't go out there." But Maya couldn't just wait. Not in the silence. Not in that suffocating, ancient quiet. She crept toward the hallway, every footstep an echo. When she reached the corridor leading to the side door, she paused. Nothing, no shadow under the door, no tapping. She almost convinced herself it was her imagination, until she saw it at a note. Slipped under the door, crisp, white paper with her name written in the same perfect cursive. She backed away, heart racing. Riley's voice was still in her ear, asking what was happening. "There's a note," she said. "Don't touch it. Just wait for me." But Maya had to know. She used a pencil to slide it open on the floor. Inside, one sentence. "You used to love stories. I'm writing a new one. And you're in it." She dropped the paper like it was radioactive. Riley arrived 8 minutes later, armed with a tire iron and a flashlight. They called Torres, who brought in a squad car. The officers found nothing. The surveillance camera at the side door, an old dummy model, had never worked. Torres shook her head. "He's pushing boundaries again. I never told him where I work." Torres frowned. "You might have mentioned it. Even offhand." "I don't think I did." "He could have followed you." Maya shivered. That night, she told her boss she needed leave. Medical, mental health, whatever worked. Her boss didn't argue. Maya moved back in with her parents for a while at a small house outside the city, surrounded by trees and quiet. She didn't tell them everything, just that she needed time. They welcomed her, unaware of the dark shadow clinging to her every step. That a week passed in peace. Then too, for a while, things felt almost normal. She started writing again, something she hadn't done in years. Just short things, Memory sketches, poetry, fragments. Riley encouraged it. If you can write about it, she said, you can control it. Maya wanted to believe that. She stopped looking over her shoulder so much. Slept a little better. Let herself read fiction again without fearing the themes. Until the morning she checked her email. She had a message from a name she didn't recognize. Readerx23@protonmail.com. Subject: Chapter 2. There was no text, just an attachment. Chapter 2.pdf. Her stomach twisted. She opened it anyway. It was a story. Point 1 she didn't recognize. But she was in it. The story was written in the third person. Flowery prose, eerie descriptions. It detailed a woman named Mara, living in a quiet neighborhood, recovering from something unnamed. It described her house, her morning routines, the specific way she steeped her tea, her walks by the garden hedge. Details no stranger could possibly know. The last paragraph read, and though Mara thought she had escaped, the story was still being written. She could not see the author's pen. But he was there. In the margins, smiling. She shut her laptop so fast it nearly broke. Riley came over within the hour. Torres was called again. They traced the email, anonymous proxy server, NO digital footprint. The file contained no metadata. I've seen stalkers use creative expression before, Torres said. It's not just intimidation, it's possession. They want to feel they have control of your narrative. Maya looked her in the eyes. What if he does? Torres shook her head. You're alive, you're talking to us. That's your power. But Maya wasn't convinced. She printed the story and mailed a copy to a private investigator Riley knew through her grad program. Someone with better tech tools than the department could legally use. The investigator, Cal Morris, former FBI Cybercrime Division, took the case personally. Most people who send this kind of content want to be seen, he told Maya over the phone. They leave a trail, even if it's faint. I'll find it. 2 days later, he called her again. I found something weird. Maya's heart stuttered. What? There's a fragment of code in the PDF, embedded in the font metadata. Not standard. What does that mean? It's a GPS ping. Not a location, it's a dynamic link. Means the file is set to call home when opened. Whoever sent it knows when and where you read it. Maya's stomach dropped. He knew I read it? Down to the minute. And what device? How is that even legal? It's not. But it's clever. What do I do? I've scrubbed your system, he won't get anything more. But Maya... What? This guy. He's not just a creep. He's highly skilled. Obsessive. You don't scare him off with silence. He adapts. That's the problem. Then what do I do? There was a pause. You play dead. Or you bait him. She didn't like either option. She chose neither at first. Instead, she went to the police with the new evidence. Torres promised to escalate the case to cybercrime and digital surveillance teams. Maya was assigned a personal liaison officer and a panic button app. She was told to avoid contact, avoid posting anything personal, and to stay in secure areas. Maya followed everything to the letter. But the story didn't end, because 1 week later, Riley went missing. Riley was always punctual. Always, she texted when she was 5 minutes late, called if she was going to miss anything by more than 10. That's why when Maya didn't hear from her after a scheduled brunch, she knew something was wrong. She called once, no answer, twice, no answer, to be why the third attempt. Maya's hands were shaking. She called Torres, who promised to dispatch officers to Riley's apartment. Maya tried not to imagine the worst, but her mind betrayed her anyway, playing scenarios like horror reels. Riley tied up, Riley gone, Riley's phone abandoned beside a spilled mug of coffee, a story being written about her too. 42 minutes later, Torres called back. She's not there. Her phone's off. Her car still in the driveway. What does that mean? We don't know yet. We're working on it. Maya felt like the air had left the room. She was alone in the kitchen, phone to her ear, sunlight trying to creep in through the window but falling short, like it didn't have the strength anymore. Could he have taken her? She asked. We're considering that, but no forced entry, no signs of struggle. Her neighbors didn't see anything unusual. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Torres sighed. You're not wrong. They filed a missing person report that evening. By the next morning, local detectives canvassed the area, tech teams tried to ping Riley's phone, and Maya was taken to a secure location, just in case. She didn't argue. For 2 days, Riley was gone. And on the third day, Maya received another email. Same address. readerx23@protonmail.com subject line. Chapter 3. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at the notification on her phone, trembling, heart galloping inside her chest. Torres was beside her this time, sitting in a tiny government-issued safe house they'd relocated Maya to after Riley disappeared. The walls were bland. The air was cold. The world outside looked gray and indifferent. Through the reinforced windows, Torres took the phone from her hands. I'll open it on the proxy system, she said. Maya nodded, unable to speak. Torres plugged the phone into a secure device, copied the attachment, and opened the file in an isolated environment. IT was another story. Another fictionalized account. This time, it was about a woman named Ray. The tone was different now, less poetic, more frantic. The prose was jagged. The paragraphs shorter. Ray was captured in the first few lines, abducted, by a man with kind eyes and a soft voice. The story detailed her confusion, the darkness of the place she was held, the way she was spoken to gently, like a child. At IT was clear it was Riley. Maya stopped reading halfway through. She couldn't. Torres did. She skimmed silently, jaw tight, expression flat. Finally, she spoke. He's taunting us. I knew he'd go after someone else, Maya whispered. But I didn't think it'd be her. She was close. He knew that. Torres began making calls. She forwarded the file to the digital forensics unit, ordered an emergency subpoena to trace the email and routing, and escalated the case to the local FBI branch. Maya sat frozen, body numb, staring into the dead space between her knees and the floor. The world had tipped on its axis. Nothing felt real anymore. Not until that night, when the silence in the room was broken by the sound of a ding. Another email. Same address. NO subject line. NO message body. Just a single file. Attachment. A video. Torres stared at the screen. No, Maya whispered. I don't want to see it. Torres didn't respond. She downloaded the video to the secure drive and ran it through several filters before opening it. The screen flickered. Static, then darkness, and then light. At a basement, dimly lit, bare walls, concrete floored. At a single chair in the middle. Riley sat there, alive, eyes wide. She was gagged but not bound. Her arms trembled, held awkwardly in front of her. She looked terrified. The camera didn't move. Then, from the edge of the frame, a man stepped into view. Maya nearly collapsed. It was him. Carter. Or whatever his name really was. He looked calm, composed, like a documentary narrator. He crouched beside Riley, smiling gently at the camera. Hello, Maya. Torres grabbed the pause key, but Maya shook her head. Let it play, he continued. You know, I always imagined you'd figure it out. You're very clever. But I hoped, deep down, that you wouldn't, that you'd let the story unfold naturally, organically. But you're always rushing, always flipping to the last page. He chuckled. It was light, almost charming. Maya's stomach churned. Riley shifted beside him. Her eyes begged. I'm going to make you a deal, Carter said, resting a hand lightly on Riley's shoulder. She flinched. You finish the story. I'll end it. Pause. He smiled again. But if you don't, I will. The video ended. Torres stood silently. Her fingers tapped against her thigh, expression unreadable. This isn't a game anymore, she said. This is escalation. He's created a narrative. He's the author, and you're the reader. He wants control of the ending. What did he mean? Finish the story? Torres looked at her grimly. I think he means he wants you to write back. Maya didn't sleep that night. The FBI showed up the next morning. A digital profiler, 2 agents, and a psychologist. They asked her everything. About their first dates, his phrasing, his tone, the way he moved. The books he referenced, the way he cooked, every detail mattered now. He thinks in arcs, the profiler said. He's not just stalking you. He's constructing something. A controlled narrative. He wants resolution, but only on his terms. And Riley, she's leverage. He knows you care. He's counting on that. So what do I do? You write, the psychologist said. You write to him, you answer his game. Maya stared at them. I'm not feeding his fantasy. No, the profiler said. You're baiting him. That will help you write it. Carefully. Embedded trackers, time triggers, false trails. He wants you to finish the story. Let's give him one. And so, Maya did. She wrote a reply. Anonymously, from a cloaked account, with help from a dozen digital fingerprints, metadata alterations, and strategic clues. The file was titled The End. Inside was a letter. She wrote about trust, about betrayal, about how stories didn't belong to the author once they left the page, that the reader was the one who truly had control. She wrote, You think you're writing my ending, but you forgot something. Characters grow. They change. They fight back. She wrote, I'm coming for you. And this time I'm the one holding the pen. They sent the file. And waited. For hours there was nothing, until a reply came. Subject, Bravo. Inside was a single sentence. Come find me, Mara. And an address, an abandoned building in the Bronx, a condemned library. The team mobilized instantly. It was a trap. They knew it. But it was also a location, a rare mistake. Ego had lured him out. Torres and the FBI tactical team surrounded the building within the hour. Drones scanned from above. Cameras fed live footage. Inside, they found a basement, a room, a chair. Riley, alive, shaking, crying, unharmed. But Carter was gone. A single note taped to the wall read, Every story needs a sequel. Riley didn't speak. For 2 days. The trauma sat in her bones, silent and heavy, woven into her breath like smoke. She was taken to a hospital first, then to a secure care facility where trauma therapists monitored her around the clock. Maya wasn't allowed to visit at first. Not for lack of trying, but because Riley wouldn't see anyone. Not even her. But Maya understood. Some wounds don't bleed. They bruise the soul. They turn sound into static and light into interrogation. Torres visited her regularly, sharing every update. She could, though there were FEW at no trace of Carter, no evidence of where he'd gone. The building where Riley was held yielded some fingerprints, partial, smudged, but nothing that matched any national database. The cameras in the surrounding area had been disabled. The GPS pings in the final email vanished through layered proxies routed through 7 countries. He's a ghost, the profiler admitted, but he's a ghost who made a mistake. He gave us an address. He wanted us to find her, Maya said. Exactly. That's the opening. They searched everything. Old aliases, past email addresses, properties matching his earlier claims. But Carter, if that was even close to his real name, had erased his trail years ago. Each new lead led to another dead end. He was more than careful. He was calculated, practiced. And he knew how to wait. Maya returned to the city 5 days after Riley was found. She no longer feared the streets. What she feared now was the silence. It was too quiet. She was certain he was watching. She couldn't prove it. But she knew. The way someone knows when a storm is coming, without radar or forecast. It was in the AI or in her skin. The way the shadows moved half a second too slow. She refused to be a victim again. With the FBI's help, she underwent digital self-defense training. She changed her phone, her passwords, got a VPN, encrypted everything, learned to spot tracking pixels, recognize phishing attempts, and harden her devices. But what haunted her most wasn't Carter. It was the feeling that she had become part of a book that wouldn't end. Each night, she wrote. Not for him, but for herself. Her therapist encouraged it, so did Torres. It gives you power, she'd said. So she wrote it all. The match. The date. The dinner. The warning signs. The knock on the door. The first email. The kidnapping. The basement. She wrote it like a novel, page after page, Even when it made her hands shake and her throat burn, she didn't expect anyone to read it. Until the day it leaked. She never found out who did it. Maybe someone on the investigation team, maybe someone in publishing, maybe even Carter. But someone got hold of her manuscript and posted the first 5 chapters on a storytelling forum under the username InkGhost88 at a thriller section. Unmoderated. The post went viral. Readers thought it was fiction. They praised the voice, the pacing, the realism. Within a week, thousands of comments flooded in. Fan theories, speculation, curiosity, and then something strange happened. Someone replied to the thread that a new username. The real author, their first comment? You missed the real ending. Maya found out when Torres called her, her voice tight with urgency. He's watching again, Torres said. Maya's stomach turned. He saw the story? He responded. On an open platform. What did he say? Torres was silent for a moment. Then, reading from the post. Stories don't end with escape. They end with understanding. I gave you everything, Maya, but you ran. Now I'm rewriting you. Maya stared out the window. What do we do? We bait him, Torres said. For real this time. The plan was simple in concept, complicated in execution. They would continue the story, publicly. Let Maya write more chapters, detailing her search for the truth, her emotional fallout, her regret for not giving Carter a chance. They would let it evolve into a confession that a return to him. They would build a new narrative. One he couldn't resist inserting himself into. They monitored all interactions. Cross-checked IPs, logged pings, embedded trackers. They waited. Maya felt sick doing it. She had to write messages to him. Comments like, maybe I misunderstood him. Maybe he just wanted to be seen. Or, I keep thinking about what he said, about how nobody really knows anyone. Maybe he was right. She hated every word, but it worked. After a week of silence, he returned. I knew you'd come back. Torres was ready. The FBI traced the reply. A minor mistake in one of the routing proxies exposed a jump node from a suburban IP in Connecticut, a townhouse rented under a fake name. They moved fast. Maya wasn't told the details until after the arrest. But when Torres visited her that night, she was pale and silent for a long time before speaking. We got him, she finally said. Maya's knees gave out. Torres caught her. I need to see him, Maya whispered. Torres didn't answer right away, then nodded slowly. Okay? It was 2 days later. In a sterile federal facility, gray halls and glass partitions. They sat her in a room. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't brush her hair fancy. She wore jeans, a plain tee, and the scar on her heart like armor. Then they brought him in. Carter, whose real name turned out to be Thomas Gerard Pierce, was shorter than she remembered, paler. Older somehow. He didn't look like a monster, just a man. Ordinary. He smiled when he saw her. Hello, Maya. She didn't answer. He tilted his head. You look tired. She still didn't speak. I assume you've come for closure. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and whispered, No, I came to watch you lose. He blinked. Just once. A crack in the mask. Then she stood and left him there. Thomas Gerard Pierce was charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, unlawful surveillance, cyberstalking, and attempted assault. Evidence from the townhouse, including documents, disguised profiles, and recordings, linked him to 3 other disappearances, including 2 still unresolved cold cases. Riley testified at the trial, so did Maya. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 60 years without parole. And Maya, she published her story. All of it. Not for fame. Not for revenge. But because there were other people out there, like her, who'd met someone online and ignored the strange comment, the too perfect smile, the locked cabinet, the just-in-case key. The book hit bestseller lists in 6 countries. It was called Swipe Right to Nightmare. And in the dedication, Maya wrote, For the ones who escaped. For the ones who didn't. And for the ones writing their way back to the light, she still checks her windows, still changes her passwords every month, still watches for shadows that move wrong, but she's not afraid anymore. Not because the world is safe, but because she knows how to fight now, and she's not alone. Not anymore. The first message didn't seem strange. Hey, your smile made my day. Leah had seen plenty of messages like that in her few months on Bumble. Most of them copy-paste jobs from guys looking to match with as many women as possible. But something about this one stood out. Not just the words, but the timing that she just uploaded a new photo. One where she was actually smiling. Not just her usual self-conscious smirk. She was wearing her favorite scarf and holding a pumpkin spice latte at the annual fall market downtown. The message came barely 15 minutes after she updated the photo. She clicked on the sender's profile. His name was Alex. Early 30s, brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and a thin, angular face that looked sharp even in soft lighting. His profile was minimalist. Tech consultant, piano enthusiast, espresso snob, I like libraries and thunderstorms. Looking for depth. It wasn't the flashiest profile she'd ever seen, but it had a certain polish to it. Not try-hard, not empty, just enough to make her linger. She messaged back. Then I guess I should keep smiling. From there, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about their favorite stormy days. Leah confessed she had an old playlist of nothing but rain sounds and 1940s jazz. Alex claimed to have an actual rain machine he used for sleeping. They swapped coffee orders, then book titles. He asked smart questions. Replied in full sentences. Never rushed. Never too flirty, but always engaged. Over the next few weeks, they kept talking. He never pushed for a phone call. Never asked for inappropriate photos. It was refreshing. Leah, who was used to dodging red flags like they were part of a video game, felt herself exhaling for the first time in months. They finally met in person one evening after work, at a little indie coffee shop in the Old Town district. Alex was waiting by the counter, his back to her, reading something on his phone. When he turned around, Leah had the briefest sensation of unease. Not for any specific reason, he looked exactly like his pictures. Tall, lean, impeccably dressed. But something about the way he smiled didn't quite reach his eyes, still. She shook the feeling off, nerves. Nothing more. He greeted her with a soft hug, and they settled into a booth by the window. They talked for almost 2 hours, music, work, family. He told her his parents had moved to Spain after retiring, and that he rarely saw them anymore. When she asked if he had siblings, his answer was clipped. One, he said. We don't talk. She didn't push. Their conversation danced through topics like birds hopping between wires, graceful, if occasionally erratic. He asked about her childhood, her travel bucket list, her thoughts on death. It was a little intense, but she liked it. He seemed genuinely interested, curious, not prying. He never touched her except for the hug, paid for her coffee, walked her to her car. I'd like to see you again, he said, voice low. Leah smiled. Yeah, I'd like that too. It was only when she got home that she noticed something strange. She pulled out her phone to text him that she'd gotten back safely, something casual, and found a message already waiting. Glad you got home safe. Sleep tight, Leah. Her smile faded. She hadn't told him she was home yet. She checked her Snap Map. Location off, no tags, no public check-ins. Nothing. She sat there for a moment, staring at the message. Then she typed, How did you know I was home already? 3 dots blinked, then vanished. Then, blinked again. Lucky guess. She hesitated, then turned off read receipts and put the phone down. The next morning, she chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe he'd seen her drive off and calculated the timing. Maybe he just assumed she'd mentioned she lived 20 minutes away. It wasn't unreasonable. Still, a sliver of anxiety had wedged itself behind her ribs. They texted a little that day, but she kept it light. He didn't push. The second date came 3 days later. He invited her over to his place. He claimed to live in a renovated warehouse loft near the river. She was hesitant, but he offered to cook, and she loved a man who knew how to use a stove. After some back and forth, she agreed, but told a friend the address and promised to check in every hour. His place was even more beautiful than she'd imagined. Vaulted ceilings, exposed brick, vintage record player spinning soft ambient jazz. It was too perfect. He made her handmade pasta with basil pesto. Poured her wine from a label she'd mentioned in passing 2 weeks ago. You remembered, she said. He smiled, a little too slowly. I remember everything about you. She laughed it off, but the way he said it echoed in her head a little too long. They ate, talked, lingered on the couch. At one point, he showed her a collection of old Polaroids from his travels. Black and white shots of bridges, markets, eerie forest trails. In one of the photos, she noticed a man in the background wearing what looked like the same coat Alex had on now. How old is this picture? She asked, pointing to it. He looked at it, then shrugged. Must be 10 years. Maybe more. You look just like the guy in the corner. He paused. Must be a coincidence. She gave a half laugh. He even has your haircut. Alex took the photo from her and tucked it back into the box. Some faces just repeat in the world, he said softly. That night, she didn't stay over. He walked her to her car, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and said, Don't forget me. I'm not likely to, she said, trying to keep the joke light. At a tea home, she tossed and turned, sleep elusive. She dreamed of long corridors with no doors, cameras embedded in the walls, and the soft, echoing click of shoes behind her. The next morning, she woke to a message, and no words, just a photo her, sleeping, taken from outside her bedroom window. She dropped the phone and screamed, then scrambled to the window, yanked the curtains open. There was no one there, just her quiet suburban street, sleepy and innocent in the early morning haze. She called the police. They came, took a report, checked for fingerprints on the window. There were none. They asked if she had enemies, if she had recently ended any relationships badly. She didn't mention Alex at first, but then she remembered something. He hadn't taken any photos at dinner. Not on the date. Not of the meal, but he'd commented, twice, on the way she held her wine glass, and she hadn't noticed him holding a phone. Do you think he could have taken a photo of me at dinner without me noticing? She asked the officer. The cop shrugged. Anything's possible. When they left, she texted Alex. Did you send me that picture? No response. Then, 15 minutes later, you look peaceful when you sleep. That I thought you'd appreciate the compliment. Her blood ran cold. She didn't reply. She blocked his number, deleted the app, called her friend, and asked to stay over for a few nights. But that night, when she went to brush her teeth, she noticed something tucked into her bag, a printed Polaroid. Another picture of her. Taken while she was walking to her car. Same scarf. Same latte. She hadn't seen it being taken, and she was no longer sure when it started, because now it felt like it had never stopped. Leah didn't sleep that night. Even at her friend Tasha's apartment, a 4th-floor walk-up with double locks and motion lights in the hallway. Every creak in the walls felt like a warning. Tasha offered her the bed while she took the couch, but Leah couldn't stay still. She kept checking the windows, walking the apartment's perimeter like a nervous cat, peeking through the blinds every 20 minutes. The Polaroid sat on the coffee table, untouched since Leah had pulled it from her overnight bag. Its corners were slightly bent, as if it had been handled too many times. She stared at it under the dim lamplight, unable to shake the sense of exposure. The idea that her life had been leaking out, one image at a time, without her ever noticing. Tasha brought over a mug of peppermint tea and sat beside her. Are you sure it was him? Leah nodded. I never gave him my address. Not even the street. You sure you didn't mention landmarks? Buildings? A bar nearby? No, I always met him somewhere public. I was careful. Tasha leaned forward. Then how the hell did he find you? Leah didn't answer. She didn't know. That was the worst part. The next day, she filed a formal police report. They took her phone, the Polaroid, and what few messages hadn't already been deleted. The officer who took her statement, Detective Morley, asked her about Alex's full name, employment, and background. She realized then just how little she knew. No last name. He never said it. What company did he work for? He just said tech consultant. That I didn't press. Address. Only his apartment. But I didn't write it down. Morley gave her a long, heavy look. We'll look into it. But off the record, next time, get last names. That night, Leah dug through every memory, every scrap of their texts and conversations, searching for clues. She remembered a street sign she saw when she left his place, Marion Avenue. She remembered a cafe receipt he'd used as a coaster, Clover's Brew. She remembered the faint, repeating hum in his apartment like industrial fans nearby. She pulled up Google Maps and tried to reconstruct his neighborhood. Then she remembered the building number on his front door, 408, Shawcross. Referenced it with Marion Avenue, found 3 buildings that matched. The next morning, she drove there, alone. She parked across the street, behind tinted windows, scanning the area that IT looked different in the daylight. Less like a romantic industrial loft, more like a forgotten piece of the city. There were no doormen, and no security cameras that she could see. Just brick, rust, and peeling paint. Building 408 was sealed. The main door was chained from the inside, a faded for sale sign hung. Sideways in the window. The mailbox was overflowing. Confused, she got out of the car and crossed the street. A woman was sweeping the sidewalk in front of the adjacent building. Leah approached her. "Excuse me, do you know who lives here?" she asked, nodding toward 408. The woman looked up, squinting. "Nobody. That place has been empty 2 years now. Someone squatted last summer, but the city cleared it out." Leah felt the hair on her neck stand up. "Squatted? Yeah. Creepy guy. Always wore the same jacket. Came and went at weird hours. Never made noise, just stared a lot. Did you get his name?" The woman shook her head. "Nah. One of my neighbors tried talking to him. Said he didn't say much." Leah thanked her and backed away. Back in her car, her mind raced. The apartment was faked at a stage. He'd created a version of himself in that loft, perfectly tailored to her interests. Vintage records, homemade pasta, travel photos, and she'd fallen for it. She called Detective Morley immediately. They sent a unit out, confirmed the building was legally uninhabited, no lease agreements, no bills, no official tenants. But in the loft on the 3rd floor, they found evidence of occupancy, a mattress, a laptop, stripped of any drives, a wall of photos, hundreds of them. Taken through windows, bus stops, public parks. Almost all of women, many blurred. Some sharp .10 were of Leah, her walking to her car, sitting at the cafe, crossing the street. Sleeping. The laptop shell was blanked, no fingerprints on the surfaces, no identifiable files. But one thing was found tucked inside the mattress. Another Polaroid. This one of Leah and Tasha. Taken through the window of Tasha's apartment. The 2 of them standing in the kitchen, laughing that he'd been watching her even after she'd fled. The police now classified it as a case of stalking and unlawful surveillance. The task force was assigned. But Morley was honest with her. He's good. Whoever he is, this isn't his first time. That night, Leah stayed at her parents' house, an hour outside the city. She needed space, time, familiar walls, but something about being in her childhood room. Posters she hadn't taken down, old diaries in the closet, made her feel like she was back in high school. Naive, unaware of the world's darker corridors, she sat at her old desk and opened a blank notebook. She wrote down everything. Every word she remembered Alex saying. Every expression. Every pause. She noted how he rarely blinked when telling stories, how he used metaphors often. How he never spoke of friends, only abstract ideas. She remembered him watching her cook that one night. Not helping, not offering, just observing like it was a test, and she remembered the scar behind his left ear. She hadn't noticed it until their 3rd date, when the collar of his coat shifted a thin, pale line running vertically. Surgical. He'd noticed her glance and quickly adjusted the collar. She'd thought nothing of it. Now it felt like a clue. The next morning, she searched medical forums, online communities, anything she could find about facial nerve surgeries or scars in that location. She came across a subforum for recovered patients from a now-defunct private clinic in New Jersey. Facial reconstruction. Neurological corrections. One patient posted about a man in their cohort who was secretive, quiet, claimed he was rebuilding himself. His username was Stormseller32. The thread was 2 years old. The account was deleted. But another user had archived a partial image. A man in profile, sitting under a fluorescent light, head slightly turned. Leah zoomed in. Her hands trembled. It was Alex. Same hairline. Same scar. Same angular cheekbones. Only the eyes looked different. He hadn't just built a personality for her. He had built a face, a version of himself that could change, be erased, be rebuilt. And she had no idea how many faces he'd worn before. Leah stared at the grainy image on her screen until the lines blurred. Her hands hovered, cold and unsure, above the keyboard. There was no doubt in her mind. The man in the photo, Stormseller32, was Alex. Or whoever he was. Same jawline, same mouth, same posture. But the eyes were wrong, vacant, dead. That photo had been taken before she met him, before the profile on Bumble, before the curated loft and vintage records and curated charm. She'd met a man rebuilt, customized, assembled with surgical precision to appeal to someone like her. And suddenly she wasn't just scared. She was furious. She called Detective Morley and sent the screenshot. He was already working a lead. Multiple reports had begun to filter in from women in neighboring cities. All different names, same man. Same MO. He went by Ethan in Hartford, Julian in Philadelphia, Colin in a suburb of DC. Always soft-spoken, always cultured, always attuned to the interests of his targets, and always gone before anyone could piece it together. You're the first one he's slipped up with, Morley told her. Or maybe the first he got careless with. Or maybe, Leah said, her voice shaking, he wanted me to see him. Morley didn't have an answer for that. The police were beginning to see a pattern. But patterns were difficult to prosecute. Without a name, a history, fingerprints, or any digital trace that lasted longer than a ghost in a server, Alex remained a phantom. No prior criminal record. No consistent identity, a shadow that only materialized when it wanted to be seen. But the photo from the recovery forum gave them a new thread. The defunct clinic, Bridge and Mercy Neurological Center, had been shut down too, years prior for improper record-keeping and patient confidentiality breaches. The building had been sold, the database scrubbed, and most of the former staff scattered to private practice. Still, one name surfaced from a blog post Leah unearthed in a now-archived neurosurgery newsletter. Dr. Stanley Heiss, former reconstructive specialist. She found a recent listing for his practice in Long Island, booked an appointment for a consultation under a false name. Tasha begged her not to go alone, so she didn't. She and Tasha arrived under the guise of being sisters. Leah wore a wig, heavy glasses, makeup contouring that made her cheeks appear rounder. Her voice pitched slightly higher. Tasha posed as the supportive sibling. The office was surprisingly modern, pristine with ocean-toned walls and soft lighting. Dr. Heiss was in his 60s, stern, barely blinked. I've read about your work at Bridge and Mercy, Leah said after the initial small talk. I've heard you did miracles. He stiffened slightly. That was a long time ago. Experimental procedures. It's all behind me now. I heard some patients came in under aliases. Anonymity agreements, privacy guarantees. That's standard for certain clientele. She leaned forward. What about a man with a scar behind his left ear? Very tall, sharp features. Possibly named Alex. Or Julian. Or Colin. He didn't react, but the tension in the room grew palpable. You're not here for a consultation, he said slowly. Leah didn't blink. No, I'm here because he's stalking me. Watching me. He built a life for me, and now I think he's watching someone else too. He stood. This meeting is over. Tasha stood too. You know something? You owe us. I owe no one, he said coldly. But I'll say this. Some patients came to us looking to disappear. We never asked why. We weren't supposed to. So he could be anyone now? Anyone. But if you're smart, you'll forget him. People like that, they don't just vanish. They become part of other people's lives. And when they're done, they vanish again. Then how do I stop him? He paused. If he's watching you, don't watch back. That he wants that. What he fears is disinterest. Indifference is the one thing he can't control. They left with nothing tangible, no records, no address. But Leah's mind was spinning. That night, she received another email, no subject, no message. Just a photo of Tasha at her job, smiling at a coworker. The shot had been taken from across the street, behind a tinted windshield. Leah's heart nearly gave out. She called Morley. He was there within the hour, so was Tasha. The photo was clear, high resolution. Likely a telephoto lens. The street cameras in the area caught nothing. Whoever took the photo knew. The blind spots. Morley sighed. He's escalating. I went to see Heist today, Leah admitted. He must have followed me. Morley looked alarmed. You need to go somewhere safe. Now. Both of you. They packed that night. Under police escort, Leah and Tasha were moved to a safe house operated by a private security firm that partnered with the Department for High-Risk Cases. Steel doors. Window shutters. Internal cameras. No internet except through monitored proxies. Still, Leah didn't sleep. The next morning, a printed envelope was slid under the front door. Security footage showed nothing. No one approaching. No disturbance. Inside the envelope, 3 Polaroids, one of Leah, one of Tasha, and one of Leah's parents in their backyard. Laughing, grilling. Leah's hands trembled. Attached was a small card in tight, neat handwriting. You went looking for the truth. Now I'll show you mine. Later that day, Leah made a decision. She asked to be taken to the press. Morley resisted at first, so did security. But she insisted. I'm done hiding. He needs the darkness. I'll burn it all down if I have to. She sat down for an interview. Anonymous at first. Shadowed lighting. Digitally masked voice. She told her story. All of it. The dating app, the curated loft. The surveillance. The photos. The image was broadcast that night. National. And the next morning, the messages stopped. No photos, no Polaroids. Nothing. For 2 weeks, silence. Then one final email. From stormseller32@tormail.org. Subject. The last face message. You've shown them my masks. Now I have to find a new one, but don't worry. Leah. Every face I wear remembers you. Every life I borrow carries a piece of yours. I'll be seeing you. There was no image attached, no metadata, no embedded trackers. Just words. Cold, clean, final. He was gone again. The case was suspended. No leads, no new sightings, no similar reports in the weeks that followed. But Leah knows better. He's still out there. Changing his name. His job, his smile, waiting. And someone somewhere is swiping right. Leah didn't expect to move on. Not really. Not in the way people meant when they said, heal or find closure. Those words felt like distant, artificial lights. Always visible, never reachable. The truth was, she'd simply learned how to exist inside the new parameters of her life. Her reality had shifted. Safety now meant surveillance. Peace meant preparedness. For the first few weeks after the final email, she lived in a state of constant edge. Every click of a door, every ring of a phone, every brush of wind against her window felt like a precursor to his return. Tasha stayed with her for a while. The two of them moving like ghosts through the apartment, whispering too much and laughing too little. But nothing happened. The messages didn't return. There were no more Polaroids, no shadowy figures across the street, no voice messages from hidden numbers, just silence. The FBI's behavioral unit advised her to treat it as real, that he had, for now, moved on. Not because he was gone, but because she no longer served the purpose in his narrative. She had shifted from muse to threat. And people like him didn't keep threats close, they vanished from them. Morley checked in periodically. The investigation was technically still open, classified now under a long-term digital stalker and identity manipulation case. The task force had files as thick as encyclopedias, but no name. Only faces. Many of them all variations of a man who could be anyone and no one at the same time. Then came the podcast. A friend of Leah's, Camila, a freelance journalist and host of a modest true crime podcast, asked for an interview. It would be private, no names, no photos, just Leah's voice, altered, her story, Shared.at first, she refused. She didn't want to relive it, to give Alex or Ethan or Stormseller32 another chapter. But then she realized she wasn't writing his story anymore. She was writing hers, so she said yes. They recorded the episode in a small soundproof studio, late at night, just the two of them. Leah spoke for hours, slowly, carefully, reliving each step from the first message to the scar behind the ear, from the fake apartment to the final photo. Camila listened in silence, asking only when necessary to be why the time they were done. Both of them sat in stunned stillness, the weight of it pressing down like heavy fog. The episode aired 2 weeks later, and within days it went viral. The internet caught fire with speculation. Listeners connected threads from other cities, other reports. More women came forward, one from Portland, another from Vancouver, another from somewhere near Dallas. All had met a man like Leah's. None had photos. All had similar stories. Charming man, curated lifestyle, abrupt and eerie ending, and all of them had scars. Not on their skin, on their instincts. Camila began compiling the testimonies into follow-up episodes. Leah helped, anonymously reaching out, coordinating messages, building timelines. What started as a single podcast became a movement. They called him the Mirror Man because he became whatever you wanted to see. Then one day, 3 months after the podcast aired, Leah received a real letter in her mailbox. She stared at the envelope for a long time before touching INO return address. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but it was careful, slanted, almost elegant. Inside was a single page, cream-colored. The scent of cologne clung faintly to the paper. It read, "You've become quite the storyteller. But every story has its consequences. You think you've won, because you changed the narrative. But Leah, you've made yourself unforgettable. No signature." She sat on the couch, heart pounding, called Morley. They took the letter, ran every test, no fingerprints, no usable DNA. The paper and ink were generic, purchased from common office supply stores. Morley looked at her, eyes grave. "He's still watching, and now he's angry." "Let him be," she said quietly. "He's lost control. That's what really scares him." She tightened her digital defenses, changed apartments again, paid for a P.O. box, added 2 security cameras to her building. But more importantly, she continued living, continued writing, continued talking to other women who had stories like hers. She joined a support network, not just for survivors of stalking, but for survivors of manipulation. Of psychological camouflage. The kind of abuse that left no visible bruise but tore everything internal to shreds. She gave talks, privately at first, then, slowly, more publicly. Her voice was still changed in interviews, her name still concealed, but the message was real. "I don't care what face he wears now," she told an audience once, her voice trembling, "because I no longer believe in the version he built for me, and I will never again apologize for seeing through it." And then, 6 months later, the trail ignited again. It came from an art gallery in Chicago. A curator there, doing inventory, flagged something odd at a donated installation. A series of abstract photographs was accompanied by a journal, handwritten and signed only as J. The curator had listened to Leah's podcast. Something about the handwriting in the journal sparked memory. The entries were strange. They weren't confessions, not exactly. They were scripts for social interactions, how to respond to grief, how to reflect excitement, how to display concern without revealing emotional investment. They read like a training manual for becoming human. The journal was turned over to authorities, and Leah was flown in to read it. She sat in the evidence room, gloves on, and leafed through the pages, her breath caught when she reached the final page. Written there, "You wanted the truth? Here it is. I don't feel anything. But you do. That's why I liked you. That's why I hate you. That's why I'm done with you." Beneath it, one final line. "New script begins soon. New role, new mask. But you'll always be my first." Leah stood slowly, the journal still open in her gloved hands. It was him. He was letting go. Or maybe he was starting again. But no matter where he went next, she had already stolen something from him that he couldn't recover. His anonymity, And now, the world was watching for the Mirror Man. His story wasn't over. But neither was hers. And now, she wasn't just surviving it, she was writing it her way. The gallery became ground zero. Once the Chicago exhibit and the journal were verified and made public, Leah's story was no longer hers alone. It expanded, tentacled, into communities of survivors, advocacy groups, digital sleuths, and true crime networks. The Mirror Man now had a name on the internet, even if it wasn't his real one. Leah watched from the sidelines as her nightmare transformed into something global. Reddit threads multiplied overnight. Amateur profilers pored over every word from the journal. Handwriting analysts, behavioral psychologists, facial recognition software enthusiasts, they all joined the digital manhunt. Theories surfaced about other victims, links to cold cases, even missing person reports that bore uncanny similarities. And then, a name began circulating. Nathaniel Keir. A foster care ghost. A paper trail of aliases and placements through the 1990s and early 2000s. Withdrawn. Gifted. Moved homes at least 8 times. Known for mimicry, silence, and sudden disappearances. Records sealed. Someone unearthed and expunged juvenile file, only fragments, but enough to point to a pattern. Disappearances near facilities he'd been assigned to, unexplained behavioral resets, gaps in time. The FBI finally confirmed him as a person of strong interest. It didn't surprise Leah. She had lived in the shadow of his obsession. She knew his ability to disappear wasn't about running. It was about erasure. He didn't move through the world like a person. He inhabited it like a story, crafting his role, wearing his lines, discarding the script once the act concluded. She wondered how many other acts there had been. How many lives had been scripts for him to explore. How many victims were out there, unsure they'd ever truly been seen. And then he returned one final time. Not in person. Not through photos, but through her inbox. Leah had created a burner account for communication with the FBI and podcast producers that IT wasn't connected to anything. Not even Tasha knew about it, and yet, there it was, from untitled voice at private notes.io subject. The final draft. She stared at it for a long time, her breath slowed. Not because of fear, though there was plenty, but because deep down, she'd expected this. She opened it. Inside was a single sentence. I tried to become someone, but you made me real. Then, an attachment. A zip folder. She didn't open it. She forwarded it to the FBI cybercrime unit immediately. The file was quarantined and opened in a secure environment. What they found stunned everyone. Dozens of videos, hours of recordings. Some were surveillance clips, grainy footage of Leah walking, laughing, shopping, but others were different. They were of him, speaking into a camera, practicing, voices, smiles, emotions, trying on personas like masks in a mirror. Hi, I'm Ethan. I teach music at a community college. My sister says I'm too nice. Julian. I travel a lot for work. Mostly project consulting. That's why I'm not on social media. Colin. Former military. I read a lot. Bit of a loner. Each clip was a performance. Each one closer to someone she'd met. The agents watched in silence, so did Leah. They cataloged every file, every frame in the final video. Timestamped 6 days before Leah's first date with Alex. He sat shirtless on a stool, a mirror behind him, staring at the camera. His voice was low, calm. I think I've got her. He smiled. It was not a human smile. Not really. More. The idea of one. Books, jazz, witty but emotionally cautious. Her laugh ends on an inhale. Vulnerability is earned. She doesn't trust easily, but she wants to. He paused. I'll give her the best version of me. He reached toward the camera, and the screen went black. The files became evidence. They were used to connect other victims. A larger criminal profile emerged, nationwide. Interpol even opened inquiries for European incidents that bore eerie similarities. But no one could confirm Nathaniel Keir's location. It didn't matter, because the myth was shattered. The Mirror Man was no longer invisible. He was documented, cataloged, known. Leah felt numb, not relieved, not happy, just still. She knew better than to believe it was over, but it was over for her. That was enough. 3 years later, she published a book, The Maskless. Surviving the Mirror. Man.it wasn't a memoir. Not exactly. It was a mosaic, a collection of survivor stories, psychological profiles, essays, and letters. Some were hers. Others belonged to women who had reached out after the podcast. Together, they mapped the anatomy of deception, the power of pattern recognition, and the deep psychological wounds left behind when someone hijacks your trust and identity. She toured under her real name now. The first time she stood on a stage and said, "My name is Leah Chalmers." Her voice shook, but her hands didn't. She smiled through tears, and the audience rose to their feet. She still gets messages, some from survivors, some from strangers thanking her for saving them before it ever started, and sometimes, some she doesn't open right away, but she doesn't hide anymore. Not from her past, not from her story. Because in the end, the Mirror Man wasn't just a predator hiding behind profiles. He was a lesson. A warning. And Leah? She became something he never expected. The author of her own ending, and a guardian for every new beginning. Cassie never told her friends about Theo at first. He was her little secret. Not because she was embarrassed, but because she was enchanted. She was tired of cynical glances and endless warnings about online dating. Everyone had a horror story. Everyone knew someone who got ghosted, catfished, love-bombed, or breadcrumbed into oblivion. But Theo was different. They matched on Hinge. His profile was quiet and articulate. Photos of him hiking in the Catskills, reading in a corner cafe, standing barefoot, in a river wearing a white Oxford shirt soaked through. There was a certain romanticism about him that felt novel. His prompts were thoughtful, even poetic. Dating me is like wandering into a place you were never meant to find, but never want to leave. I get along best with people who don't fear silence. That it says more than noise ever can. Truth or dare? Neither. Truth without being asked. Action without performance. Cassie was used to dry jokes and poorly cropped mirror selfies. Theo's profile hit differently. She messaged first, "Okay, I'll bite. What is a place you were never meant to find?" He responded 5 minutes later, "The mind of someone who sees you before you see yourself." She blinked at her screen. It was a line from a poem she loved. A Lesser Grace, by Nora Ellen. No one quoted that poem. No one outside of MFA programs or obscure poetry boards even knew it existed. She replied immediately, "Ellen, that's bold." His response, "Bold would have been assuming you wouldn't recognize it." That's how it started. Within days, they were texting every hour. Morning, night, even while at work. He always knew the right thing to say, not just flattery, but observations that made her feel studied. Understood. Cassie told herself she was being cautious. She Googled his name, searched his photos, reverse image searched every picture. Nothing suspicious came up. His LinkedIn profile checked out. Theo Renner, 31, works in digital restoration, old film reels, analog to digital conversions, things she barely understood. Quiet guy. Soft-spoken, a little intense. They talked about movies, art, memory. His favorite painting was Nighthawks. Hers was Ophelia. He said he found beauty in stillness, in moments where nothing obvious happened but everything shifted underneath. He didn't like social media, called it curated rot. She agreed, even as she felt guilty scrolling through her own Instagram archive, that he made her feel like the old ways were better. Letters, libraries, vinyl, paperbacks. After 2 weeks, he asked her out. They met at a used bookstore that also served wine. It was cliché and perfect. Theo was even more beautiful in person. Angular, ghostly in some ways. He wore a black wool coat and boots like he'd stepped out of a Bergman film. He greeted her with a soft kiss on the cheek and a single white tulip. "Because Ophelia never got flowers," he said. Cassie laughed. Her cheeks flushed. That night, they stayed until closing. He never touched his phone. Just listened. Asked questions. Told stories about working on obscure horror films, how old reels whispered when you ran them too slow. She asked if he ever got creeped out working alone. He smiled. The dead don't scare me. The living do. She tilted her head. Why's that? They expect things. It was a strange answer, but delivered so calmly she barely noticed. They kissed in the rain before parting. After that, they were inseparable. Theo never pushed her to meet his friends. Said he didn't have many. Claimed he preferred solitude. Cassie was okay with that. For a while, she enjoyed the bubble. The intimacy at IT felt like stepping into a parallel world where everything was quiet and meaningful. But slowly, the sheen began to dull. The first time it happened, she was going through her apartment. One morning, looking for her scarf. She found it. Folded in her drawer, but it had been washed. She hadn't washed it. She hadn't even worn it recently. She dismissed it. Probably an old wash. Forgotten. Then, 2 days later, she found a coffee mug in the sink she didn't remember using, and then her laptop, a model she always closed, was slightly ajar when she came home. She brushed it off. Sleep deprivation, work stress, forgetfulness. Until the night she woke up and found Theo watching her. She had fallen. Asleep on the couch, cradled in his arms after a late movie. But something had woken her. An instinct, a shift, and when she opened her eyes, Theo was sitting upright. Not asleep at all, just watching her, expressionless. Her heart thudded. Theo? He blinked slowly, then smiled. You talk in your sleep, he said. It's beautiful. She sat up, hugging her arms to her chest. I didn't know you were awake. I wasn't. Not really. She laughed, unsure. That's cryptic. He leaned forward and brushed her hair back behind her ear. Everything's a dream until it isn't. She laughed again, more nervously this time. Then glanced at the clock. It was 3:07 am. Theo stayed the night. But Cassie barely slept. The next morning, he made breakfast, kissed her neck, whispered poems. She said nothing about the strange moment. It felt too intimate, too vulnerable to question. But the doubts began to build. 3 weeks later, while cleaning her closet, she found a small, red-bound notebook she didn't recognize. At first she thought it was Theo's. He often carried little journals and sketched in them while she worked or read. She flipped it open. The first page read, October 1st, study begins. Below it, C. Prefers Earl Grey to breakfast blends. Always wipes mouth twice after sipping. Page after page followed. Laughs louder when nervous. Reacts badly to compliments about her eyes. Change tactic. Dislikes physical touch first thing in morning. Introduce warmth through scent instead. Will avoid confrontation if metaphor is introduced. Each entry was dated. The notes read like an analyst's fieldwork. Observations, triggers, scripts. Cassie dropped the notebook. Her ears rang. She hadn't given Theo a key to her place, but he'd stayed over more than once. Slept in her bed, cooked in her kitchen. She picked up the book again, flipping to the latest entry. December 1. Cassie suspects nothing. Plan B viable. Waiting for signal. Her hands trembled. There was no plan A, no signal. Only fear. That night, she didn't confront him. She called Talia, her best friend, and told her everything. Talia wanted to call the cops. Cassie wasn't ready yet. They needed more. Talia came over the next night and helped Cassie search Theo's belongings. While he was in the shower, they rifled through his coat pockets, his bag. Inside a small leather pouch, they found a flash drive. Later that night, after Theo left, claiming he had to check on something at the lab, they plugged it into a secured laptop. What they found changed everything. Audio, files, labeled by date and location. Dozens of them. All of Cassie. Conversations in her apartment. Phone calls. Snippets of her singing. Her brushing her teeth. Her crying. Even her whispering in her sleep. He'd been recording her. And he'd labeled each file like scenes in a film. Scene 23 confession, scene 24. Withdrawal, scene 25. Pivot, the last file was labeled. Scene 26. Termination.it had no timestamp.it was the only file left unplayed. Cassie's finger hovered Over the play button. Scene 26, termination. The word termination pressed into her like ice under the skin. It wasn't the word itself, but its context. Cold, clinical, decisive. The same way you'd label the final moment of a lab experiment. Or the last scene of a play. When the curtain falls and the lights die, Talia, sitting beside her on the couch, reached over and gently pulled her hand back. "We shouldn't play it alone," she said, voice trembling. "This is bigger than us now." Cassie nodded, but her mind raced ahead. She couldn't stop imagining what that file might contain. Something violent, or threatening, or worse. Something she didn't understand. Some final manipulation that would wrap around her like a noose without her even realizing it. They called the police that night. They expected skepticism, strange recordings, found notebooks, secret files, but they had evidence. Clear, damning evidence. Detective Nadira Gomez arrived with 2 uniformed officers, reviewed the drive in person, listened to a few of the audio clips, and froze at scene 23, confession, where Cassie could be heard whispering her insecurities in bed while Theo responded with gentle murmurs. The kind of intimacy that only deep trust could allow. "He was recording this?" Gomez asked. Cassie nodded, sick. "I've handled stalking cases," Gomez said quietly. "But this is curated, controlled. He was building something." Cassie whispered. "He was building me." The police confiscated the drive. Promised to investigate. But Theo was already gone. Cassie's next call to him went straight to voicemail. His number disconnected the following day. His Hinge profile vanished. The email she'd once used to send him silly poems and memes bounced back with a 550 mailbox not found error. She went to his apartment. The one he'd taken her to twice. It was empty. No sign of struggle. No leftover items. Even the scent was gone. It was like he'd never been there. The building manager didn't recognize his name. The unit wasn't registered under Theo Renner or anyone at all. "It's a ghost lease," he said. "One of those corporate dummy units no one ever really lives in." Cassie's heart sank. She didn't have a real last name and no photos of them together. Even his selfies, when she scrolled back, had minimal background, blank walls, gray skies, blurred city corners. Nothing identifiable. Nothing traceable. He had been erasing himself from the beginning, and she had fallen for it all. When Detective Gomez played scene 26, she did so in the presence of 2 other investigators, a digital forensics agent, and Cassie, seated stiffly between them. The file was short. 58 seconds. It opened with Theo's voice, calm, slow, unmistakable. "She's close to waking up," he said, barely above a whisper. "The performance is unraveling faster than expected. She noticed the scarf. She noticed the cup. She noticed me watching." Pause. Footsteps. "I should have changed pace sooner. Should have shifted emotional tone before withdrawal. But I didn't. I wanted too much." Silence for 10 seconds. "I forget sometimes. She's not a character. She's real." Another pause. "I won't make that mistake again." The recording ended. Cassie sat still, blinking against the rising nausea point. One of the officers murmured. "It sounds like research." Gomez nodded grimly. This wasn't just obsession. It was methodology. Forensics swept everything. They traced what little metadata they could, spoofed. The drive had been encrypted, then factory reset. Most of the files were cloned from cloud backups and copied manually. No email logs. No account syncs. Theo, if that was even close to his name, had worked with surgical precision. Cassie's therapist called it hyper-narcissistic identity manufacturing. But to Cassie, it was simpler. He had been building a film in which she was the lead, and he was every other role behind the scenes. 2 weeks after the police opened the case, Cassie began receiving packages. No return address. Each was wrapped in brown paper, tied with black twine. No handwriting. Just a small sticker with a number. 1, 2, 3. The first package contained a VHS tape. The second, a Polaroid camera. The third, a printed still frame. Cassie, smiling in profile, holding a book in her lap on the subway. She didn't remember anyone taking that picture. She didn't even remember the book. The fourth package contained a film reel. Inside it, a small sticky note. "You never saw the real ending." She took it to the police. Gomez's team brought in film experts, preservationists, anyone who could help decode what this was. They borrowed a secure lab at a local university to analyze the reel without damaging it. What they found made the room go silent. The footage was a montage, clips, surveillance style of Cassie's life. Some looked years old. Others were recent. But the oddity wasn't in the content. It was in the perspective. The camera lingered not just on her face, but on her reactions. The way her mouth moved when she was confused. The way her shoulders tightened when anxious. The way her fingers curled into her sleeve when frightened. There were title cards, typed in faded courier font, between each segment. Scene 8, The Smile Before Doubt. Scene 14, Breathless Between Lies. Scene 21, The Beginning of Distance. And finally, Scene 27, Redress. The final frame was blank. Then it faded to a single sentence. You never auditioned and I cast you anyway. Gomez stood from the console. I've seen Stalkers. But this is directorial. This is theatrical psychopathy. Cassie was placed under protective watch. That night, she wrote everything down. Every date. Every conversation. Every look. She began to realize just how meticulously Theo had choreographed her life for months. The books he mentioned, the poems he discovered, the meals they coincidentally both liked. She recalled mentioning a dream once, offhandedly, during a phone call, that she wished someone would make her coffee the way her dad used to. French press, 2 spoons of cream, and a sprinkle of cinnamon. Theo made it the next morning. She had thought it was thoughtful. Now she saw it was surveillance. More women came forward. A podcast picked up her story, under a pseudonym at first. Theo had used different names, slightly altered backstories, sometimes even different accents. But the blueprint was the same: charm, attention, curation, control. The police found backup hard drives hidden in storage units registered under long-dead shell corporations. The footage spanned cities: Boston, New Orleans, Portland, Austin. Cassie had not been the first. But she may have been the only one who got out before the final scene. Forensic analysts concluded that Theo was likely not his real name. But they had enough now to assign a real term to him: constructive predation. A methodical emotional predator who built identity constructs around vulnerable women, learned their rhythms, inserted himself seamlessly, and then vanished once the narrative no longer served him. Cassie helped draft part of the criminal profile. She still has nightmares, still hears his voice in quiet moments, still checks her drawers and windows twice, still feels like a character being read. But now, she's rewriting the script. And Theo? His final role may still be waiting. But now, someone else is directing. Cassie didn't trust mirrors anymore. They made her feel like she was being watched, even when she was alone. Even when she knew there was no one on the other side. It was irrational, she told herself. Paranoia. But irrationality was the currency Theo had spent for months, turning ordinary things into tools, routines into surveillance, intimacy into theater. She moved apartments, got a security system, changed her locks, her passwords, her routes to work. A detective told her once that people like Theo count on psychological erosion. Not just fear, but exhaustion. They don't just invade your home. They infect your judgments. So she kept a journal now. Not for him, but for herself, to Theo document what was real, what was memory, what was hers. But even writing became difficult. Every word had to pass through a gauntlet. Is this mine? Or was it planted? Because that's what Theo did. He planted an idea here. A compliment there. A line of poetry in her voicemail. A memory that felt like it had always belonged to her, when in truth it had been inserted, crafted, rehearsed, executed. She learned from the forensic analysis that Theo had likely known about her months before they matched. Investigators traced an IP address used to open her professional portfolio site. It had been accessed from a proxy mask originating 2 states away. Repeatedly. Someone had studied her reading list, her published essays, even liked a tweet she'd posted 3 years earlier. Sometimes I wish someone would make me into a story, just not a tragic one. It was clear now. Theo had made her into a story, but the tragedy hadn't come from fate. It had come from design. The investigation stalled. After the packages, after the reel, after the flash drive, there was silence. Again. Gomez and the task force worked every lead. They found more victims. Not all were as fortunate as Cassie. One woman from Vermont, Lena, had gone missing after meeting a man who shared a profile eerily similar to Theo's. Her case was reopened. No evidence, no trace. Another woman from Seattle, Marin, had been institutionalized after claiming she was a character in someone else's movie. She had described her stalker as a dream in skin. No one had believed her, until now. Cassie visited her. The facility was quiet, clean, bathed in cool blue tones that made the world feel like an aquarium. Marin was thinner than her photos, pale. Her eyes looked older than they should have. "I thought he loved me," Marin said, hands trembling over a cup of tea. "But then I realized he never blinked during our silences. He didn't rest, he recorded." Cassie swallowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean he was always listening. Even when we weren't speaking. Especially then." She reached beneath the blanket in her lap and handed Cassie something. A torn piece of paper on it. A single typed line. Scene 19. When she begins to doubt, slow the rhythm, embrace, soften voice. Cassie closed her eyes that she'd read that line before. Almost word for word in her notebook. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a habit. It was a playbook. Cassie met with the behavioral unit again. This time, they included a forensic theater consultant. An odd profession, but apparently useful for cases involving role immersion, identity disassociation, and performance-based manipulation. The consultant, a wiry man named Trevor Hess, reviewed everything: the notebook, the script segments, the tapes, the flash drive. "This man isn't just playing roles," he said after hours of review. "He's writing realities. He's what we call a director type 2. That's someone who not only builds a character for themselves, but stages the world around their target so the victim slowly steps into a scripted narrative. It's rare. More common in cult leaders and long-con artists. But in this case," he tapped the notebook. "He was running rehearsals." Cassie blinked. "What do you mean?" Trevor flipped to a page and pointed at the dates. "They overlap. Look, on October 14, he notes. Cassie doesn't respond well to physical praise. Pull back. Try conversational intimacy. Then October 15, attempting same scene. Adjusted tone. Greater success. That's not a diary, it's a script log." He flipped to another page. "And here, scene 25. Pivot. That's the term he used when you began to withdraw. He had a structure in place for how to react." Cassie stared at the book. "So none of it was real?" Trevor shook his head. "That's the thing. For him, it probably was." A month passed. Cassie's story aired on The Second Self, a podcast that focused on identity manipulation and psychological abuse. She used her real name this time, her voice. Her words. She wanted to reclaim what had been taken. The episode reached over 4 million downloads within weeks. Survivors came forward. Not just of Theo, but of men like him. Women began sharing their stories, not of physical violence, but of the elegant kind of abuse. The kind that wore art as a mask. The kind that sounded like poetry but felt like erasure. The kind that made you question your own voice. They called it narrative abuse. Cassie helped establish a network, NOVA, Narrative Objectification Victims Alliance. Together with therapists, digital investigators, artists, and survivors, they created training for therapists to recognize these signs, helped victims map their stories and find the lines that weren't theirs. Still, there were nights when Cassie felt Theo's presence in the corners of her home, a flicker of silence too long. A dream in which her own voice repeated lines she didn't remember saying. One such night, she received a package. She didn't open it alone. The authorities scanned it. X-ray, dogs, forensic inspection. Inside was a photo album, but not of her. Of him. Different looks, different places, smiling with different women. Always the same eyes. Cassie flipped through, nausea rising. Then, on the final page, an envelope. Inside it, a note. Typed, "You were never the only story, but you were the first that ended without me." She sat still for a long time. Gomez touched her shoulder gently. "He's either angry or nostalgic." Cassie shook her head. "No, he's warning me." 2 months later, the body was found. It was in a cabin, deep in the Adirondacks. Unidentified man. Suicide, no fingerprints on file. But on his chest was a note, written in red ink. Final scene. Fade to black. A security camera outside the nearby gas station caught a blurry image of the man entering the woods. Cassie confirmed. It looked like Theo. The coroner wasn't sure. The body was damaged, deteriorated, but a tattoo was discovered on the left shoulder blade. One line of text. I write, therefore I am. Cassie had never seen it on him. But Theo always said the most important parts were off-screen. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She simply walked outside and let the wind hit her face. Theo, or whatever he was, had vanished. Maybe into the ground. Maybe into someone else. But her story no longer ended with him. Because for the first time in a long time, Cassie saw herself not as a character, but as the author. And she was just getting started. Cassie hadn't expected peace. Not after Theo. Not after the scripts, the recordings, the packages, the body found in the woods. Closure wasn't real. Not in the way people fantasized about it. There was no switch to flip, no morning to wake up and find the weight had been lifted. But there were quiet moments, moments where she could breathe, moments where she didn't feel like a performance being watched. Those moments mattered. She moved again, this time not out of fear, but choice. A third-floor walk-up inn. A quieter part of town with high windows and creaky floors and a fire escape that faced the sunrise. The kind of place she would have chosen before any of this happened. She painted her walls with colors she'd never liked before. Not because she liked them now, but because she wanted to find out if she could. She bought new clothes, stopped journaling for a while, took up sculpture. There was something satisfying about shaping something solid, something she could see and touch and know for certain. Hadn't been placed there by anyone else. But still, there were shadows. Even in peace, she'd wake at night from dreams where she was reciting lines she didn't write. She'd open her phone and feel eyes in every interface. Every algorithm that tried to finish her sentences, she kept the album. The one from the final package, photos of Theo with other women, in other lives, other masks. She studied each face, memorized each location. Every woman who had been cast in his productions. Not all of them had come forward. Not all of them could. But for the ones who had, she kept a record, because someone had to. Cassie began lecturing. It started with university panels, then small law enforcement training workshops. Her topic was unique. Very few people were equipped to talk about narrative predators as the FBI had come to define them. Fewer still could speak from both experience and insight. She talked about constructed intimacy, the art of mirroring, absorbing, customizing affection to become indistinguishable. From authenticity, she talked about gaslight scripting, how manipulators create story arcs that make victims feel responsible for every emotional shift. And she taught about scene framing, how environments, music, clothing, even smells could be weaponized for emotional control. She wrote about it too. Her articles gained traction in psychological circles. She began co-authoring research with behavioral analysts and trauma counselors. People started to take notice. Then came the email. It arrived in her personal inbox, one she hadn't shared since before Theo. No subject line, no sender address. Just a single sentence. You're becoming quite the director yourself. Cassie stared at the screen. She didn't breathe. She checked the metadata. Blank. She checked her VPN. It hadn't failed. The email wasn't traceable. But she recognized the rhythm of the line. The way the sentence bent at the midpoint. The soft menace disguised as praise. It was Theo. Or someone who knew him. Or someone who wanted her to think it was him. She printed the email and took it straight to Detective Gomez. Is it possible he's still alive? Cassie asked. Gomez hesitated. The body was decomposed. Dental records were inconclusive. But the tattoo? He could have had it put on someone else. Gomez nodded. It crossed our minds. Then why did you close the case? We didn't. We just stopped chasing a ghost. Cassie leaned forward. What if he's trying again? Then we reopen everything. But if he's smart, and we know he is, he's watching to see what you do next. Cassie nodded slowly. Then we give him something to see. She went public. Fully. No voice filters, no pseudonyms, no protective anonymity. She published a book, Scene 26. What They Wrote Into Me. A hybrid memoir and analytical breakdown of Theo's manipulative structure at IT chronicled everything. The text messages, the field notes, the coffee mug in the sink she hadn't touched, the way he whispered that she smiled exactly like a woman in an old French noir. The book hit bestseller lists within 3 weeks. But more importantly, it reached survivors. Dozens more came forward. Some who had never even realized they had been manipulated. Some who had been convinced they were just too sensitive. Cassie responded to as many as she could point. One message struck her hardest. It came from a woman in Prague, a visual artist named Mira. Her message was simple. He called himself Luke. He said I was the missing line in his poem. I thought I was crazy until I read your book. You weren't his first, but you were the first to name him. Cassie cried when she read that. Not from sadness, from validation. Months passed. Then a package arrived. Different this time, NO brown paper, NO twine. Just a flat envelope. Inside, a DVD, and a single sheet of paper. Typed, Final Cut. Cassie didn't touch the disc. She called the FBI directly. They ran it through an air-gap system. Inside was a single video file, Cassie_Final MOV. It began with old footage. Cassie walking through a bookstore. Her laughter in a coffee shop. Sitting on a bench reading a book. Moments she never noticed were being filmed. Then the cuts began. Her sleeping, her crying, her arguing on the phone. Intercut with typed title cards. Scene 12, Withdrawal Scene 18, Fracture Scene 23, Resistance Scene 26, Termination, and then Scene 27, Resurrection. The screen went black. For 10 seconds. Then a new image appeared. A mask. White. Blank. Hanging on a hook. The camera zoomed in slowly until the mask filled the screen. And then, it smiled. Not a CGI trick. Not a literal shift. But somehow the lighting, the framing, the edit, it gave the illusion of expression. Then came a voice, synthetic, modulated, but familiar. Theo's cadence. You took my power, but you gave me shape. Now the world knows how to watch, but not how to see. I've become the blank you feared. I've become the story they want. And you, a pause. You'll always be the prologue. The screen faded to static, then cut to black. The FBI couldn't trace the file's source, but they found something hidden deep in the code. A signature fragment buried in the binary. It read. Elus_0008_proj_beta Luke. Myra's Luke. Another iteration. Another mask. Cassie didn't panic. She prepared. She called Mira. They spoke for hours. Mira had escaped early, too. The similarities were eerie. The lines, the gifts, the staging. Together, they formed a new initiative, Project Redraft, a global, encrypted database for tracking narrative-based psychological manipulation. Partnered with cybersecurity firms, trauma psychologists, and counterintelligence units. The mission was simple. Map the pattern, flag the method, protect the next page. Because the story wasn't over, and Cassie knew that. But now it wasn't Theo's story anymore. It was hers, and she wasn't being watched. She was watching back. Cassie stood in front of a room full of strangers, her palms open, her voice calm but firm. This isn't about monsters, it's about mirrors, she said. Because the most dangerous predators don't hide under beds or in alleyways. They hide in reflections of the people we want to love. The crowd was silent. Not from discomfort, but reverence. It was the first international conference for Project Redraft, hosted in Berlin. Survivors, psychologists, law enforcement, and journalists had gathered to discuss an emerging psychological threat that had gone unnamed for too long: narrative predation. And Cassie, once a frightened woman reading field notes written about her own behavior, was now the keynote speaker. Her slides weren't dramatic. No haunting photos. No grainy footage. Just words. Words like reconstruction, curated personae, emotional scripting, identity theft without devices. She'd coined that last phrase after reviewing one of Theo's notebooks that the FBI had retrieved from a secondary storage unit registered under one of his many aliases. The title scrawled across the inside cover had read, Cassie v1.3 Full Arc / Exit Strategy TBD. Cassie had become a version. But now, she was the author. After Berlin, Project Redraft expanded rapidly. Reports began arriving. From South Korea, Norway, Argentina, men and women who recognized elements of the mirror script pattern. Predators with fluid identities. Victims shaped to fit prefabricated roles. Sometimes it ended in psychological devastation. Sometimes it ended in death. But always it started the same, a connection. Too perfect. Too immediate. Too good. The project wasn't about fear.it, was about recognition. If you could identify the script, you could refuse to read the next line. Survivors were trained to detect performative mirroring, subtle behavioral conditioning, the empathy loop that manipulators used to keep people in emotional stasis. They taught law enforcement how to see past surface charm. They created software tools to detect anonymized behavioral patterns across platforms. They started work on legislation to criminalize persistent identity manufacturing for the purpose of emotional manipulation and coercion. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was working. Then, just before the one-year anniversary of Theo's presumed death, Cassie received a message. Not an email, not a letter, but a voicemail, private, left on a landline number tied only to Project Redraft's legal department. The number wasn't published, not searchable. The voice was synthetic again, smooth, faceless, but unmistakable in its design. I heard your speech, it said. You've done well that you've built your own audience. You even took my title away. But Cassie, don't forget, you needed me to begin without a story. You were static that I gave you motion, that I gave you meaning. Static crackled on the line. You can delete me, erase my name, change the lens, but the first frame, that was mine. You'll always be a scene I directed. Click. The FBI traced the call to a relay server in Algeria. Useless. The message was routed through 12 countries, stripped of identifiers, possibly generated by a customized AI voice clone. Cassie didn't respond. She didn't flinch. She did something else. She sent a message of her OWN. It was a public letter, published in The Guardian under her real name. It was titled, Dear Whoever You're Becoming Next. In it, she wrote, You are not the God of beginnings. You are not the author of my pain. You were a chapter, and a badly written one at that. I see you now, not as a shadow, but as a blueprint, predictable, patterned, and patterns can be broken. Every time you create a new face, a new story, a new mark, you leave fingerprints now. Digital, emotional, psychological. There are people watching you, and not the kind you control. Your story ends with isolation. Mine begins with survival. Yours was a film with a locked ending. Mine is an open book, and I'm still writing. The article went viral. Survivors printed it, pinned it to fridges, read it aloud in group meetings. It was translated into 15 languages, and for a long while after, the silence remained. 3 years passed. Cassie rebuilt. She dated again. Slowly, cautiously, deliberately. Nothing rushed, no idealizations, no movie moments. Just people. Flawed, kind, real. She told them about Theo eventually, but only after trust had been earned. Most were shocked. Some were moved. One man, Michael, stayed. They built something real. No scripts, no third act betrayal. Just two humans, asking questions and listening without agenda. Cassie continued her work. Writing, training, helping other victims of narrative abuse. She started a foundation, held annual retreats. Wrote curriculum for high schools about coercive control, and every now and then, she'd find herself at the window late at night, looking at her own reflection. Not with fear, but with clarity. She had once been a character in someone else's film. Now she was the camera, the writer, the editor, and she had final cut. Always. When it started, Naomi thought she was being paranoid. She was no stranger to bad dates. She'd been stood up, lied to, even accidentally matched with a coworker's ex, but she was careful. She always met in public, shared her location with a friend, never let her date pick her up or walk her home. Safety was routine, instinctive, ingrained after years of learning the hard way that politeness doesn't protect you. So when she met Devin on OkCupid, she followed her usual rules. His profile was the kind she normally would have skipped. Slightly over-edited photos, vague job description, creative consultant, and an odd quote in his bio. I see people not as they are, but as the versions of themselves they forgot. But something about his messages intrigued her. He didn't open with a joke or a compliment. He opened with a question. What moment in your life made you afraid of being truly seen? Naomi stared at it for a long time, then replied, What makes you think I am? His answer, Everyone is. I just ask first. It wasn't flirtation and it was confrontation. Wrapped in charm. They started talking. Long messages, nightly exchanges, even mid-morning check-ins. Devin was articulate, curious, well-read. He'd ask deep, almost invasive questions, but never pushed when she deflected. He answered her with equal vulnerability, telling her about his estranged father, his struggle with anxiety, his years of therapy. He wasn't self-deprecating, just self-aware. It felt honest. They met a week later at a bar in Midtown. He was taller than his photos, dressed in clean, neutral layers. Quiet charisma. He looked at her like he already knew her, which was both flattering and a little disarming. He didn't talk much about himself unless asked, and even then, his answers were measured. I don't like too much online noise, he said, sipping a neat whiskey. It makes people think they know you before they've earned the right. Naomi nodded. She agreed. She'd deleted most of her socials after college. The thought of being seen out of context by strangers unnerved her. Devin understood that. Mirrored it by the end of the night. He hadn't tried to kiss her, just walked her to her car and smiled. I hope this isn't the only time, he said. It wasn't. They saw each other again the following Saturday. Then again midweek. He was always available, but never clingy. Always attentive, but never demanding. He remembered details. Texted at the perfect cadence. Asked for consent about everything, from holding her hand to sitting closer. It was perfect. 2 perfect. 3 weeks in, Naomi noticed the first anomaly. She was telling him a story, something mundane, about a camping trip she took in high school, and mentioned a phrase her childhood best friend used to say, only the lost get to find new things. Devin smiled. You've said that before. She frowned. I haven't. Not to you. Must have been in your messages, he said quickly. You probably wrote it in passing. But she hadn't. She was sure she'd never used that phrase in a message. It had just come back to her for the first time in years. She let it go. Then, a few nights later, he cooked for her at his place at a beautiful brownstone in Crown Heights. Wood floors, minimalist design, faint scent of eucalyptus in the air. Everything was carefully chosen. Books arranged by tone, not title. Every light dimmable. While she helped clean up, she noticed a framed photo on a side table. It was a black and white shot of a woman standing in a hallway, blurred slightly, just out of focus. She picked it up. Who's this? Devin looked over. His smile didn't falter. A friend from undergrad. Took photography together. She looks familiar. Probably just the angle. Naomi nodded and set it down, but it bothered her. Later that night, when Devin left the room to grab wine, she took another look. The woman's pose. It was strange, unnatural. Like she hadn't known the photo was being taken, and the hallway behind her was empty, too empty to ask if it had been staged. Naomi let it go, until she didn't. The next day, she Googled his name. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No Facebook. No work portfolio. Not even a Whisper profile or stray username. He had mentioned once working with a startup in Austin. She found the company, No Devin listed in staff history. She tried a reverse image search on his profile picture. No hits. Her stomach tightened. That evening, she casually asked, Do you ever Google yourself? He smiled. All the time. Just to make sure I still don't exist. She laughed nervously. Seriously. I'm serious. I like being untraceable. That night, she went home early and searched harder. Eventually, she found something. Not on Google, on a defunct dating forum archived in the corners of Reddit. Someone had posted a warning 2 years ago. Anyone else dated a guy named Devin who never shows up in photos? The comments were skeptical. The thread was short. The OP never returned. But Naomi's blood went cold, because they'd included a sketch. Rough, hand-drawn, based on memory, and it looked exactly like him. She didn't confront him. Not right away. Instead, she ran an experiment. The next time they were together, she made up a story about growing up with a twin sister named Nadine who died young. She described details. Said Nadine loved birds, hated thunder, used to sing off-key to calm Naomi down. None of it was true. Devin listened, nodding solemnly. That explains a lot, he said. She smiled. I've never told anyone that. You didn't have to, he replied. I could feel it in the way you talk about quiet. He believed her or wanted her to believe he did. Either way, Naomi's gut twisted. She knew what this was now. Not curiosity. Not connection, curation. Devin wasn't responding to her, he was reflecting her. Every vulnerability, every quirk. He absorbed them, shaped himself around them, became the perfect complement. But only after drawing out what he needed. He was a mirror, not a man. She began planning an exit, gradual, clean, controlled. She couldn't just block him. Not yet. Not when he knew where she lived. When he knew her schedule. When he moved through her world with such invisible grace. She needed to disappear from his script without rewriting it, so she started pulling back. Bit by bit. Delayed responses, shorter calls, cancellations. Devin didn't press. He adjusted, too well. One night, she woke to a voicemail. His voice, low, warm. I think you're pulling away. That's okay. Some stories end. But Naomi, just remember, I saw the version of you that most people miss. And if that version ever gets lonely, pause. I'll be around. Watching. Waiting. Just in case you forget who you really are. Click. She threw up. She blocked the number. Changed her locks. Wiped her online presence. Told her sister, her friends, her HR director. Filed a report, even though there was no crime and no evidence. Just fear. But Devin never contacted her again. Not directly. Instead, her best friend received a message from an unknown account a month later. Do you know if Naomi still keeps her windows open at night? It was signed. A friend from undergrad. Naomi had been afraid before. She knew the pulse-pounding tension of walking to her car at night. The nervous glances over her shoulder after too many footsteps echoed behind her. But nothing. Not bad dates, not the stories she'd heard, not even the shadowy encounters she'd escaped, had prepared her for the kind of fear that arrived without sound. Because Devin was no longer visible, that he was gone. But somehow, present, after her friend received the message. Do you know if Naomi still keeps her windows open at night? They rushed to the police. An officer took the report, expression grim but restrained. No IP trace, he said. Anonymous email, routed through 3 VPNs. This one's a ghost. They referred Naomi to a digital crime specialist. Recommended she stop using her primary devices. Suggested wiping her cloud backups. He could be in your metadata, one said. Not just stalking you physically, he may have cloned your behavioral profile. That phrase stuck with her. Behavioral profile.it sounded like an algorithm, like she was a type, not a person. Someone who liked morning playlists. Someone who made tea at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. Someone who used the same 3 words in every text. You okay, love? That's what Devin had been watching. Recording. Reconstructing. Naomi didn't return to her apartment. She moved in with her cousin in Brooklyn for 2 weeks, then into a short-term sublet under a different name. Every online account was deleted, burned, or anonymized. She wanted to believe she was safe. But she also knew Devin was a performance artist, not a pursuer. He didn't chase, he curated. And he'd already collected her. A month passed. Then another. No new messages. No sightings. No evidence. Naomi began to rebuild. Carefully, slowly. She started therapy with a trauma specialist trained in identity abuse and digital intimacy violence. Her therapist, Dr. Jane, introduced her to a framework Naomi had never heard before: constructive manipulation, a technique where predators build false identities to match the perceived emotional needs of their victims. It's not about lying, Dr. Jane explained. It's about reflection. They build an image of who they believe you want them to be. They watch you to know what to reflect back. The danger isn't just the deception. It's the disappearance of your own sense of realness. Naomi understood that too well. She remembered a moment during their second date, when she had laughed at a joke Devin made, and immediately noticed him watching her reaction, not with pride, but with calculation as if storing it, logging it. She had confused that for attentiveness, but now she knew. It was a mirror checking its own reflection. The third month passed. Then, one rainy Thursday, a package arrived. Naomi's name.no return address. Shipped to the office where she used to work, an address she hadn't listed in over a year. Inside the padded envelope, a single Polaroid her, sitting in her old apartment, barefoot on the floor, drinking from a chipped blue mug. The angle of the photo was strange, low, possibly from behind a vent or baseboard. She remembered the mug. She remembered the moment, but she had never seen that angle. Also inside, a note. Typed, centered. Some moments are too perfect to forget. Her heart thundered. She dropped the envelope and backed away. Her co-workers watched as she collapsed into a chair, trembling, struggling to breathe. The police came again, took the photo, the envelope. The fingerprint dust returned nothing. The package had been handled with gloves, shipped from out of state. Detective Riva, assigned to her case, spoke plainly. He's not chasing you. He's preserving you. What does that even mean? Naomi snapped. Riva looked pained. He's not obsessed with getting to you. He's obsessed with the version of you he already has. Naomi couldn't decide which version of that idea was worse. Later that week, her therapist asked her a strange question. If Devin was building a story, do you think it ended? Naomi blinked. I don't understand. Dr. Jane leaned forward. Some people who engage in identity curation don't stop when the relationship ends. You were a character in his internal narrative. You think he's still writing it? Naomi didn't know how to answer. That night, she checked her windows twice, sat on the floor in the dark, and remembered something Devin had said to her once, during a walk in Prospect Park. We're all just edits of ourselves versions. The ones we show people are the drafts. The real thing, that never gets seen. She had thought it was poetic. Now it made her stomach churn. She realized she didn't just want to escape Devin. She wanted to delete the version of herself he thought he owned. Naomi started filming herself. Not to share. Not to post. Just to observe. She wanted to reclaim her image, learn what was hers and what had been mirrored back at her. She recorded herself talking, walking, sitting silently. She played it back and studied her own eyes. The way she frowned. The pauses in her speech. She wasn't looking for Devin. She was looking for the absences. The pieces that had been edited without permission. She started writing again. Journals, essays, even fiction. She began drafting a piece called The Curated Room. A story about a woman who finds herself trapped in a house where every object reflects a part of her that she didn't put there. It helped. Somewhat. Until one day, when she left her writing studio, she found a second envelope on her windshield. Inside, a page torn from her own journal, typed beneath. I preferred the version where you didn't write, she screamed. Neighbors came out. Someone called the police. This time, Riva didn't hesitate. We're going to move you. Today. We'll call in the digital unit. We're going to scrub everything. Naomi stood shaking, clutching the torn page, wind slicing across her face like glass. How did he get into the building? She asked. How does he keep knowing where I am? Riva didn't answer right away. Then, because he's not finding you. He predicted you. Naomi froze. It was the most terrifying sentence she'd ever heard. Naomi didn't sleep that night. Not in the guest bedroom the department had arranged for her in a secure residence across the city. Not beneath the tightly sealed windows or behind the deadbolt steel door. Even with police surveillance rotating outside every 4 hours, she couldn't stop hearing the sentence over and over. He's not finding you. He predicted you. Detective Riva had meant it figuratively. Probably. But Naomi felt it physically. like the very architecture of her life had been charted out months before she realized she was a subject. Devin hadn't just inserted himself into her routine. He'd calculated her future. Behavior was just another input, her boundaries, routines, even fear responses. They were patterns he had anticipated. She wondered, how long had he studied her before they even met? Was their first message really their first point of contact? Or had he already built the profile by then? Her therapist called it anticipatory mimicry, the process of observing someone deeply enough to mirror not just who they are, but who they will become. It's rare, Dr. Jane said over a secure call. But with enough access and insight, someone could script a person's behavioral arc, especially if the victim has consistent emotional patterns. And you think that's what he did? I think you're living in a story someone else outlined. Naomi shivered. Then how do I end it? You can't. Not if you keep playing your part. She began to think about every choice as a decision tree, what Devin would expect versus what would surprise him. She changed her habits. Ordered foods she didn't like. Took buses instead of subways. Switched writing from nighttime to morning. She dyed her hair. Started dressing differently. That it felt like armor, a slow reclamation of unpredictability. But then the messages changed. Not in content. There were no new voicemails, no envelopes, no emails. But in absence. It had been 2 weeks. Nothing. And somehow, that was worse, because it meant he was watching again. Just not correcting her. She began receiving reports from the Redraft Network, a survivor group she'd joined months ago. Other victims had received messages too, all similar in tone. Nostalgic, observing, clinical. But one victim, a woman in Chicago named Delilah, shared something different. She'd been left a book that was mailed to her office, shrink-wrapped, with no note. Inside, short stories. All of them featuring women eerily similar to Naomi, to Delilah, to others from the Redraft forum. Each story detailed events the victims recognized, first meetings, favorite drinks, arguments, even thoughts they'd never spoken aloud but had written in journals, apps, or unsent emails. One story had a character named Nomi. Another, Della. Another, Cam. Each story ended the same way, not with violence, but with vanishing. The characters were quietly erased, written out of their lives, disconnected from their friends, wandering aimlessly, not dead, not harmed, just hollowed out, erased from within. Naomi stared at the scanned pages Delilah sent her. She was reading her own life, warped through fiction, stripped of agency. Detective Riva worked with the digital team to trace the printing of the book that had been ordered through a vanity press in upstate New York. Paid for in cash. Ordered in person. Surveillance footage revealed nothing. Whoever placed the order had worn a mask and gloves. The manuscript had been titled, The Unwritten Women. The listed author, archivist. Naomi remembered something Devin had said once, casually, while watching an old French film together. There's power in being the one who archives the truth, and no one remembers the subject. Only the framing. She'd thought it was philosophical. Now she saw it for what it was. Intent. 3 days later, Naomi's old college roommate, Elise, texted her out of the blue. Elise, hey, did you mean to reactivate your old blog? Naomi froze. She hadn't touched her college-era WordPress site in over 6 years. It had been locked. Forgotten. Naomi, no, why? Elise, it's online again. There's new stuff on it. Kinda creepy? Naomi clicked the link Elise sent. The blog was indeed active, but the content wasn't hers. Every post was dated months apart. Entries written in her voice, mimicking her writing style, her phrasing, her anxieties. One post was titled, I miss the version of me that didn't know the ending. Another, some mirrors don't reflect, you dissolve inside them. The latest post, I tried to escape the script, but I forgot who was holding the pen. Naomi's throat went dry. It wasn't just mimicry. It was ghostwriting of the self. A digital avatar of her, alive online, living out a version of her story that she no longer controlled. The police took down the site within 24 hours, but the damage was done. Search engines had already cached it. Snippets had already spread through niche writing forums. People were sharing the posts, quoting the language, marveling at the haunting vulnerability. Naomi wasn't just being watched. She was being performed. Someone out there believed they knew the real her, because they had read what they thought she had written, but she hadn't, and now, she had to answer for words she didn't say. That night, Naomi stood at her window and stared out into the street below. She thought about the version of herself that Devon had built. She imagined that version sitting across from her now, head tilted, eyes soft, mouth curled in thought. Would that version be grateful? Would she thank him for seeing her? Or scream for being stolen? Naomi didn't know. But she did know this. The only way to end a story someone else was writing was to write over it. She sat down at her desk, opened a blank document, typed, "You never saw the real me. You only saw your reflection, and reflections can't love you back." Then she hit publish. Not to a private folder. Not to a ghost site. But to the same platform where he had once curated her. It was her voice, her image, her framing. And it wasn't fiction. Naomi's post reached over 80,000 views in its first 48 hours. It wasn't an expose. It didn't name names. It didn't cry for sympathy. It was just a single entry. Raw, deliberate, defiant. A reclamation of narrative. "You didn't steal me. You edited a draft I already discarded. I'm not your character. I'm not your ending. I'm not a paragraph in your archive. I write myself now. Every word, every revision. And I don't need to be seen to exist." The post spread fast. It was shared on survivor forums, university campuses, artist collectives. People added their own responses. A movement began to simmer. Readers tagging their own reclaimed stories with a hashtag that formed almost by accident. Hashtag unscripted. Naomi hadn't meant to go public. She hadn't planned to be a symbol. But she quickly realized something strange as her. Some names are aliases. Some files end abruptly. We're reaching out to the redraft team to help identify them. She nodded slowly. And then Riva said something that made her heart stop. "There's one folder labeled N.Mirror. What? It's not labeled with a name. Just those 2 letters. Naomi thought hard. Like, Naomi Mirror. Or something else. They opened it. Inside, scanned pages from a hand-bound notebook. Each page was a script, a dialogue point, one character labeled, and the other, archivist. They weren't conversations from her life. They were predictions, speculative dialogues, written out in longhand, imagined future interactions between Devon and Naomi, confrontations, reconciliations, even imagined therapy sessions. In some, she forgave him. In others, she killed him. In one, she agreed to disappear with him and start a new life. They were fantasies. Not erotic, not romantic. Just control. Narratives he wanted to believe were possible. But none of them had come true. Because Naomi hadn't followed the script. That was her power. Later that week, the Redraft Network invited her to speak again. This time at a private conference for trauma psychologists and federal cybercrime analysts. She hesitated, but agreed. She titled her keynote, "Exit the Frame." She opened with a single image, a blank page, and spoke. "Survivors of narrative predation often ask, 'How do I know what was real?'" She paused, let the silence breathe. "The answer is you don't, and you don't have to, because realness isn't what you remember, it's what you choose to rebuild." She talked about agency theft, identity distortion, the mechanics of emotional scripting, about how predators design entire relationships like immersive theater, where the victim is the only one not given a copy of the script. But the truth is, if you're the one still here, then you get to write what happens next. She didn't need applause, but she got it. Not polite, not staged, earned. Months passed. Naomi found stability, not in silence, but in movement. She stopped trying to be unpredictable and started trying to be authentic. Not for protection. For herself. She published a book, not about Devon, but about pattern disruption. How to reclaim the self when someone else has tried to write you into extinction. It was titled, "Not Yours to Draft." Reviews called it poetic, measured, scathing. She didn't read them. Because she didn't write it for approval. She wrote it to erase the last invisible line someone else had drawn around her point one evening. She received a packaged NO return address. She opened it cautiously. Inside, a mirror, small, unadorned, framed in simple black wood. Taped to the back was a note. Typed, "This time, I see you." She didn't call the police. She didn't run. She walked calmly to the kitchen, took a hammer from the drawer, and shattered the mirror into 26 pieces. Then, she picked up one shard and held it to the light, saw herself. Smiling, Naomi kept one of the mirror shards. Not as a souvenir, not as a symbol, but as a reminder that reflections can lie. She placed it inside a velvet-lined box, buried beneath notebooks in a drawer she rarely opened. When she saw it, she didn't think of Devon. She didn't think of the man who had studied her, mimicked her, rewritten her. She thought of herself, of the girl who stared down a performance and refused to play along. The one who broke the glass instead of checking her makeup in it. That shard was the punctuation mark on a story someone else had started and she had claimed. And now, she was ready to start again on her terms. Her new apartment overlooked a narrow side street where dogs barked during rush hour and someone always forgot to bring in their trash bins. It was imperfect, loud, and real. Naomi didn't monitor her windows like she used to. She still locked her doors, double, always, still checked over her shoulder. At night, trauma wasn't a wound that healed clean. It calloused in layers, cracking sometimes, but harder underneath. But she wasn't scared anymore. She was watchful. There's a difference. Fear keeps you trapped in your own silence. Watchfulness lets you speak. Right? Live. Naomi had decided to live. She became part of Redraft's executive advisory board. The network had grown, funded by nonprofits, trauma research institutes, and survivors-turned-donors. What started as a chat thread now held legal support, digital forensic teams, peer mentors, even international liaisons. And more importantly, data. For the first time, behavioral manipulation through identity mimicry, narrative stalking was being tracked. Names were emerging. So were patterns. Several predators had been formally investigated, even charged. Thanks to Naomi's case and the ones it revealed, they weren't always like Devon. Some were less careful, others more aggressive. But all followed the same core playbook. Study the subject. Reflect their vulnerabilities, weave emotional dependence. Rewrite memory. Remove autonomy. Exit without trace. Somewhere between a cult and a con. But now, people saw it coming. Because Naomi had taught them what the mirror looks like before it turns on you. A documentary team reached out. They wanted to tell her story. Naomi declined. "I've already told it," she said. "And I'm telling new ones now." Instead, she proposed something else. "Tell her story," she said, handing them a list. Delilah, Cam, Mira, Della, Lena, they were the women whose files had been on Devon's drive. Some had gone public. Some had never spoken. All had survived. Together, they formed the core of a project called Unwritten No More, a multimedia series featuring women who'd escaped narrative predation, reclaiming their own endings. Not just the trauma, but the rebuilds. The messy, beautiful, stubborn rebuilds. Naomi helped produce it. Never appeared on camera, but her words, her guidance, shaped every voice. She became what Devon never imagined. The director of her own narrative arc, not the subject of his point. 1 year after the publication of her book, Naomi returned to the city courthouse where she'd once filed her first police report. She wasn't there for a case. She was giving a guest lecture to new recruits. Her session was titled, "When the Mirror Watches Back, Psychological Patterning in Modern Stalking." The cadets took notes, asked sharp questions. One young officer raised his hand. "How do you spot someone like that, before it's too late?" Naomi smiled gently. "You don't always. They're good at being what you want, that's the point. But if you can't catch them right away, how do you stop them?" She nodded. "You remember that performance can't be sustained forever. You ask questions that break the script. And you listen not just to what they say, but to the rhythm of how they change when you stop playing your role. And if that doesn't work," Naomi's voice was steady, "you get help, you speak, you tell your story, and you write it down. Because your voice, the real one, is the only thing they can't imitate forever." That night, she walked home alone. The city felt quieter. Not because it had changed. Because she had. She passed a coffee shop she and Devin once went to. Paused. Went inside. Ordered a drink she never liked when she was with him. Sat at a corner table. Took out her journal and wrote, "The story you tried to write me into is over. I'm not your character. I'm not your plot point. I'm not your theme. I'm the sequel you didn't plan for. And I'm just getting started." She didn't look over her shoulder when she left. Didn't need to. The mirror was gone. Only the author remained. Sophia's story didn't start with Ali.it, started with a name. James. Not an alias. Not an overcomplicated persona. Just James. Simple, elegant, precise. His profile on the dating app Clover was almost aggressively normal. 2 photos. One at a dog park with a tan retriever named Scout, and another blurry, late afternoon shot of him by a window with a book in his hands. NO shirtless gym pics. NO group photos. NO filters. His bio read, "Books, coffee, peace and quiet." Looking for someone who values honesty over perfection. Sophia had been single for a year after her last relationship crumbled under the weight of long-distance silence. She wasn't looking for a soulmate. Just someone who could make conversation without turning it into a performance. James was a breath of still air. Their messages were straightforward. He asked about her favorite comfort book. She said The Secret History. Her ideal Saturday, record store, Vietnamese iced coffee, a walk alone with music, and her favorite part of her day, waking up. Before the city does, when it's quiet and blue. She asked him the same. He answered thoughtfully, without drama and no overreaching sentiment. "I like it when someone remembers something I didn't realize I told them," he'd written. That moment when they repeat it back like a gift, feels like being known. It charmed her. It wasn't romantic in a grand way, but it felt real. Their first date was at an outdoor food market. Safe, public, colorful. He wore a gray jacket. His hair neat but not overly styled. He didn't rush her. Didn't touch her unnecessarily. Just walked beside her, matching her pace. "I'm not used to dates that don't feel like job interviews," he said. Sophia laughed. "Right? Like we're competing to sound interesting enough to be hired as someone's emotional support animal." They both laughed. It was easy. He didn't even ask to kiss her that night. Just said, "I'd like to see you again," with a quiet assurance. The second date was a hike. The third, his apartment. That's when things began to shift. Not drastically. Not loudly. Just enough. His apartment was meticulous. Not sterile, but curated. Like every object had passed through some unseen filter. The bookshelves were color-coded, but not alphabetized. Candles all in the same style of ceramic holders. Blankets folded, not throned. A leather-bound journal rested on the coffee table. Pages slightly curled at the edge as though frequently turned but never dog-eared. She noticed he didn't have any personal photos and no friends and no family. When she asked, he smiled. "I had to start fresh a while ago." She nodded. Didn't press. He made her tea, chamomile and honey, and played ambient music through a speaker system built into the walls. It wasn't pretentious. Just unusually tranquil, too tranquil. But the weirdest part. Every time she visited, there was a new book lying somewhere in plain sight, on the arm of the chair, beside the sink, half open on the table, and each one was a book she had mentioned in passing. Not in full conversation. Not in obvious statements, just fragments. Like when she had told him, "I haven't read Beloved in years, but it wrecked me when I was 19. And then, 2 visits later, there it was, Beloved, bookmarked at the halfway point like he was reading it now. When she commented, he just smiled. "You mentioned it. I figured I should know what shapes you." At first, it was sweet. Then, it was eerie. Because the books weren't just there. They were always perfectly staged, as if each one had been placed with a purpose, as if she was walking into a scene. Sophia started paying more attention. Little things. When she stayed over, she noticed he always woke up at the exact same time. 6:17 a.m. Even without an alarm, he'd stretch, smile at her and say, "Coffee?" The first time it was endearing. By the 6th, it felt mechanical. She began testing it. One night, she set an early alarm for herself, got up quietly, and stood by the window at 6:16 a.m. He stirred at 6:17 a.m. He sat up, smiled, said, "Coffee?" Sophia laughed nervously. "Do you have that coded into your DNA?" He blinked. "It's a habit that I used to work mornings." But he'd never mentioned a job. Not a specific one. He had told her once that he was between contracts, that he worked in design systems, whatever that meant. She Googled him, name, number, photos, nothing concrete. She tried reverse image searches. Nothing. That's when the unease became constant. Then came the dog, Scout. She'd never seen him in person, only in the dating profile photo. "Where's Scout?" she asked one day. "You never bring him up anymore." James was washing dishes that he didn't turn around. "He died last year." "But your profile?" "It's an old picture. I didn't have the heart to change it." Something about the way he said it, flat, rehearsed, hit her wrong. She let it go. But that night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking, what if Scout never existed? What if the profile was curated entirely from borrowed pieces? What else had been staged? She started making notes. A private file, encrypted, where she logged every small inconsistency, every mirrored book, every oddly timed compliment, every word that felt lifted from her own phrasing. Patterns began to form, and the word that kept echoing in her mind was echo. James didn't talk about himself unless asked. And even then, the answer always looped back to her. She mentioned once that she hated surprise parties. He told her about the time he had won Throne for him, and hated it. She mentioned her mother's hospital stays when she was 13. He said he visited hospitals weekly as a volunteer. She mentioned the smell of burning leaves in autumn, making her feel like she was watching the world exhale. The next time she came over, he had a candle lit, labeled "Smoked Leaves." Sophia sat on his couch that night, looking at the flickering light, the carefully placed copy of Beloved, the color-coded bookshelves, and realized, this isn't intimacy. This is mimicry, and it wasn't just strange. It was designed. The final straw came when she found the drawer. She hadn't meant to snoop. She was looking for a charger. She opened a drawer in his desk. Top one unlocked, and inside were two things: a small leather notebook and a Polaroid. The photo was of a woman. Not her. Someone else. Same angle, same lighting, same smile. She'd seen him ask her to give for his camera, and in the notebook, a line was scrawled in neat ink. Sophia, fragmented, hesitant, seeks safety in specificity. Prefers circular dialogue over confrontation. Leans toward literature as self-explanation. Favorite phrase, it's complicated. Sophia backed away, slammed the drawer shut. James walked in a minute later, carrying 2 mugs. "Coffee?" he said, smiling. Right on time. 6:17 a.m. Sophia didn't drink the coffee. She took it, out of reflex, politeness, self-preservation. But her hands were trembling. James didn't seem to notice. He set his own mug down, slid into the chair across from her, and smiled with the exact rhythm and ease of someone who'd practiced. Not flirted, not reacted, rehearsed. The notebook still burned in her mind. The clinical phrasing, the way her emotional patterns had been documented like research. Seeks safety in specificity. She could still feel those words, crawling beneath her skin like wires. She forced herself to speak. "You always wake up at the same time." He sipped. "I'm consistent." "No, you're programmed." A pause that he tilted his head, curious. "What does that mean?" "You study people. You reflect them back. You're not having a relationship, you're running a simulation." James didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, "You're upset. You took notes on me." He didn't deny it. "Why?" Another pause. Then, "Because people never show themselves honestly. They show you fragments. I collect the pieces. Then I hold up the mirror." Sophia stared at him, nauseous. "That's not love. It's understanding. No understanding is earned. What you're doing is construction. You're building a version of me that you think you can manage." He sat back, the smile fading just slightly. "And does it feel managed?" Sophia didn't answer, but her silence spoke. She left that morning without another word. He didn't follow, didn't protest. He just watched her walk out of the apartment with the same unreadable calm she now recognized as vacancy. Not stoicism. Not maturity, emptiness dressed in empathy. She didn't go home. She went straight to the subway, transferred twice, and ended up in a cafe in Soho where she knew the baristas and could sit with her back to the wall. Then she cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just quiet, shaking grief. Because it hadn't been just affection that it had been belief. She had believed in James. Believed he was safe, thought she'd found something real in a sea of overstated personalities and attention games. But what she'd found was a performance crafted precisely to fit her outline. Not her soul, her profile. She called her friend Emily. Emily listened without interruption. Then said, "You need to report this." To who? He didn't do anything illegal. Emily paused. Didn't he? Taking notes like that. Mimicking. Emotional surveillance. It has to count for something. Maybe. But it'll sound like I'm overreacting. You're not. That night, Emily slept on Sophia's couch. They locked the windows, double-checked the door, made tea and watched a movie in silence. Sophia didn't sleep much, but she dreamed, and in the dream, she was walking through James's apartment, opening drawer after drawer, and each one held a photo of her in a different pose, at a different age, in different lighting. Like he'd been watching her for longer than she could imagine. When she woke up, her hands were clenched. The imprint of her own fingernails, etched into her palms. The next morning, she drafted a report. It wasn't formal, not at first. She emailed a counselor she knew from a writing workshop she'd attended the year before. Someone who specialized in coercion and trauma recovery. She titled it. Subject: Emotional mimicry in digital dating, possible psychological abuse. She laid out everything. The curated books. The predictive compliments. The data in the notebook. The mechanical routines. The missing backstory. The fact that Scout, the dog, in his profile, had never existed. The counselor responded quickly. She'd seen similar cases. It was called constructive identity manipulation, when someone intentionally curates a personality to align so precisely with a target's emotional makeup that the target begins to doubt their own instincts. It's a form of control that doesn't need physical proximity, just access, vulnerability, willingness. Sophia had checked all those boxes. She was a reader, an empath, a listener, someone who appreciated being seen. He hadn't just seen her, he replicated her. The counselor recommended documenting everything and connecting with others. There are forums, she wrote, support circles, advocacy groups. That night, Sophia joined one. And that's when she realized she wasn't the first. The forum wasn't on a major site. It was a private invite-only message board hosted through an encrypted server. Username required, background checks vetted by moderators. The first thread Sophia clicked on was titled, "He called himself Simon. His apartment was too clean. His books were always what I loved. I thought I was being loved, I was being built." Another, "Daniel, I see you before you know you're worth seeing. I thought it was poetic. Now I realize it was a script." And then one that made her stop breathing. "James, Brooklyn, Scout the dog. Apartment in Crown Heights. Anyone else?" Sophia clicked. The post was dated 6 months earlier. The user's name was November Song. The description matched everything: his speech patterns, his wardrobe, his "I like it when people remember small details" routine, his waking up at exactly 6:17 a.m. The user wrote, "He made me think he was a mirror. But mirrors only show you what you already know. He was more like a projection, something that needs your light to exist. The moment I stopped feeding it, he vanished." Sophia responded. She poured everything out. And when she hit send, a message blinked into her inbox 2 minutes later. From November Zong. It read, "You're not alone. I've met 4 of us so far." He changes names, clothes, cities. But he always leaves the same fingerprint. A notebook, a script, and a perfect version of you that stops being yours. Sophia's hands shook. Then came a second message. "Are you ready to stop being a character in someone else's plot?" Sophia reread the message at least 5 times. "Are you ready to stop being a character in someone else's plot?" It wasn't a threat that IT wasn't a plea that IT was a door. And she stepped through it. She responded, "Yes, I want to know everything." Within the hour, November Song replied with a link, secure, password protected, no index. When Sophia clicked through, she entered a private digital workspace titled. The curation files at first glance, it looked like an academic research hub. A structured archive. Case entries, behavioral pattern tables, psychological annotations, regional timestamps. But the contents were anything but academic. They were lived accounts. Dozens. Each named after the city where the interaction had begun. Seattle, Portland, Berlin, Toronto, Boston, Brooklyn. Each file contained a story, one like hers, women who had met someone like James. Not always James. Sometimes Simon, Daniel, Reed. But always the same rhythm. A dating app, a perfect match. A slow burn of affection. An eerie sense of being seen too well. A notebook, drawer, or folder. Then the vanishing. And behind it all, him. A man with many faces, but the same signature. One line showed up in nearly every file, in some form. "I see the version of you that you buried." Sophia's blood chilled. James had said the same thing to her, word for word. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't personal. It was his script. The network called itself the Second Voice. It had started as a message thread between two survivors, grew into a Google document, then a Slack workspace. Now it was a distributed intelligence network of over 20 women across multiple countries, all with one goal: to expose the man behind the mirror. They called him the Archivist. The name came from one of the earliest survivors, a writer from Edinburgh who had found a leather folder in his nightstand labeled Subject/Emotional Evolution Log Volume 2. She'd copied 2 pages before she ran. Sophia read the pages. They were almost unreadably clinical. Point 1 entry. Subject 4B. Exhibits preference for indirect intimacy. Withholds disclosures until emotionally cornered. Responds to perceived stability with regression to childhood anecdotes. Patterned withdrawals follow displays of control. Another. Subject 6A. Inclined toward literary self-construction. Uses books as identity anchors. Emotional coding via narrative metaphors. Ideal subject for delayed confrontation phase. Sophia realized her entry, fragmented, hesitant, seeks safety and specificity, fit the pattern exactly. He didn't fall for people, he studied them. She wasn't special. She was an experiment. The Archivist had a process. The Second Voice had mapped it. Phase 1. Calibration, initial connection. Passive. Observation. Low-stakes interaction. Phase 2. Immersion, mirroring begins. Subject experiences high emotional safety and resonance. Phase 3. Echolock, emotional vulnerability is reflected back to the subject as recognition. Phase 4. Scene control, the archivist begins to influence behavior through subtle narrative framing. Phase 5. Disappearance or extraction, the subject is either discarded or manipulated towards psychological surrender. No one knew why he did it. Some said it was control. Some said it was obsession with authenticity. Others thought it was something darker, a need to simulate human connection without participating in it, at a sort of emotional voyeurism. But all agreed on one thing: he was still out there. And now Sophia was part of the search. She spent the next week diving into the files. She found eerie connections, phrases, gestures, even furniture choices. In 3 cases, the archivist used the exact same brand of candle. Smoked leaves. In 5, he had worn the same gray wool coat. In 7, he had used a nearly identical line. People don't want to be loved. They want to be understood first. He wasn't just repeating himself. He was running iterations. And every time he got better at hiding. No social media, no financial trail. Burner phones. Short-term leases. Always just enough new to stay one step ahead. But patterns always reveal something, and the Second Voice had found a crack. A survivor in Philadelphia, Alma, had managed to photograph one of his IDs before he discarded it. Fake, of course. But the name, Julian Cross, a name that hadn't appeared in any of the other files. They traced it through a hotel booking he made under that name. A reservation he forgot to cancel. Sophia stared at the details on the screen. Name, Julian Cross. Date, 3 months ago. Location, Hudson Valley Hotel, The Olmsted house, she knew the place, a historic, and she'd once mentioned it on a date with James. He'd nodded. Said he loved quiet, off-grid places like that. Sophia realized, with a shiver, that wasn't a reaction. That was a confirmation he'd already been. The second voice mobilized. They cross-referenced local property records, searched public transportation logs, combed through digital check-ins. It was laborious. Obsessive. But that's what it took. And eventually, they found it. A small cottage, recently rented under a new LLC in a name no one recognized. Somerbrook Design Limited, empty online presence. Paper trail led nowhere. But satellite images showed it had lights on. Regular use. Deliveries. A shell. A safe house. A lab. The women voted Sophia would be the one to go. Not alone, never alone. But she would knock. Because maybe it was time. The archivist saw what happened when a subject picked up the pen. Sophia stood at the edge of the gravel drive, heart pounding like the engine that had brought her there. The cottage was unassuming. 2 stories, whitewashed brick, ivy crawling over the windows like veined hands. The porch sagged slightly in the middle. A vintage mailbox leaned crookedly on its post. From a distance, it could have belonged to a retired professor, a writer, a quiet man, but Sophia knew better. Behind that door was no ordinary recluse. It was the man who had memorized her down to the pitch of her silences. The one who knew her favorite metaphors before she knew she'd shared them. The one who had been writing her, piece by piece, without her consent. The archivist, James, Julian, Simon, Reed, and now, whoever he was today. She wasn't alone. 2 members from the second voice waited in a car down the road. Cam and Alma, watching through binoculars, phones ready, windows cracked. The local authorities had been alerted. They wouldn't interfere unless called. There was no warrant and no legal standing. Just a woman confronting the man who had rewritten her life. Sophia climbed the porch, raised her fist. Knocked. Once. Twice. No answer. She was about to knock again when the door creaked open on its own. Not wide. Just enough to say, "Come in," without words. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The air smelled like cedar and ink. Inside was soft light and smooth silence. No music, no movement. The living room was clean, spare, precise. Shelves lined the walls, but not with books, with notebooks. Dozens of them. Black, brown, gray, identical in shape and size. Each one labeled in neat, blocky handwriting. Each spine marked with 2 initials, H, W, and S. Sophia's breath caught. She stepped closer. One of the notebooks read, "Letter." She reached for it. Her fingers trembled. Inside, pages of observations, transcripts of conversations, maps of emotional responses, annotations of her facial expressions during specific words. When I say belonging, she inhales sharply. When I say mirror, she blinks twice. Sophia slammed the notebook shut. Behind her, a voice, calm, crisp. "Did you come here to read, or to be read?" She turned. There he was. Not James, not Simon, him. Wearing a wool sweater, casual jeans, bare feet on polished wood. He smiled faintly. "I thought you might come." Sophia didn't move. "Did you plan that too?" He tilted his head. "Only loosely." She swallowed her fear. "How long have you been doing this?" A pause. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He exhaled. "Long enough to know that the first version is always the weakest." "You mean the woman?" "I mean the rendering." She stepped forward, fury creeping up her spine. "You don't render people. You erase them. You turn them into echoes of what you want to study." He didn't flinch. "You're angry. I'm real. That's something you'll never be." The room was too still, too quiet. Every word felt like it echoed back from hidden microphones. He watched her. Then, without warning, turned and walked toward a door at the back of the room. "This way," he said. "I want to show you something." She hesitated, then followed. The door led to a study. A large table sat in the center, covered in loose sheets of paper. Typed pages, diagrams, printed screenshots on one side. A wall of pinned index cards, arranged in columns. Each card held a name. Each name had notes beneath it. Sophia scanned the wall. She recognized some. Delilah, Alma, Mira. Others she didn't. Under her own name. Subject 8B. Progression. Disrupted. Arc. Incomplete. She turned to him, stomach churning. You cataloged us like characters. He nodded. You're more than that now. What does that mean? It means you've stepped outside the frame. Her pulse raced. I was never inside it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, his voice cracked. She was. Sophia blinked. Who? He walked to a small cabinet in the corner, pulled out a photo album, set it gently on the table, opened it. Inside, images of a woman. Candid, intimate, natural, smiling, reading, laughing, alone. The woman was young, blonde, wore the same coat in every photo. Sophia didn't recognize her, but she recognized the look in his eyes as he stared at the pictures. This was real, he said. Until she left. Then I stopped improvising. Sophia's voice was low. So you replicated her? No, he said. I fragmented her, built versions, pieces, not to replace her, but to understand why she left, why the story unraveled. Sophia felt the bile rise in her throat. You used people to replay your failure. He didn't respond. You didn't want connection, she continued. You wanted control over why it ended. Still silence. Sophia stepped back. You don't love people. You archive them. He looked up then, and for the first time, she saw it. Loss. Deep. Quiet. Rotting. But no remorse. Only a question. What will you do now? Sophia stared at him. Then turned, slowly, toward the wall of names, pulled out her phone, snapped 5 photos, turned back. You're not the author of this anymore. And she walked out. Sophia didn't look back. Not when the door clicked shut behind her. Not when her boots crunched the gravel. Not when she reached the edge of the road where Alma and Kim waited in the car, wide-eyed and silent. She got in without a word. Kim reached across and squeezed her hand. Did you get what you needed? Sophia stared straight ahead. No, she said. But I took what he thought I wouldn't. And then she uploaded the photos. All 5 dots straight into the encrypted second voice cloud. Names. Notes. Evidence. Proof. That the archivist wasn't just a myth, a ghost story passed between survivors like some urban legend of digital romance gone sour. That he was real. Documented. Categorized. And now, exposed. In the weeks that followed, the second voice shifted from a whisper network to a coordinated task force. The photos Sophia had taken cracked open the scale of what they were dealing with. There weren't just 10 or 15 women, there were dozens. Possibly more. Women who hadn't come forward because they blamed themselves, because their families didn't believe them, because no law had been broken that the system recognized. But now the records were undeniable. Emotional profiling, behavioral manipulation, pattern psychological mimicry. The foundation for a case was finally taking shape. A pro bono legal team stepped in. Digital forensic analysts, behavioral psychologists. They all saw the same thing. Sophia had seen the moment she stood in that curated living room, surrounded by notebooks filled with simulated selves. This wasn't just predation. This was a system, a one-man architecture of stolen identities, rebuilt and recycled in endless scripts where the only constant was his control. Sophia went public. Not under a pseudonym. Not behind a blurred screen. She stood in front of a press panel, flanked by Cam, Alma, Delilah, and 2 other survivors, and told her story. Not the dramatic parts. Not the trauma porn. She talked about how it started, how she felt seen, how she didn't notice when her reflection stopped being hers, how the flattery of recognition became the suffocation of replication, how love, when perfectly tailored, can become the most invisible trap of all. The room was silent when she finished. One reporter asked, "What do you want to say to him if he's watching?" Sophia leaned forward. I hope he is, because I want him to see what happens when the story keeps going after he exits the stage. Authorities opened a multi-jurisdictional investigation. New York, Pennsylvania, Oregon, Canada, Germany. Interpol got involved. The cottage in the Hudson Valley was raided. The notebooks were seized, hard drives, scripts, voice memos. AI-generated text simulations. They found software bespoke, capable of producing diary entries in a target's voice, capable of writing conversations with them based on prior interactions, capable of generating real-time responses designed to sound more like the subject than the subject themselves. The archivist had evolved from mimic to machine, but it was all there now, open and no more shadows. Sophia didn't attend the hearings. She had already said what she needed to say. She spent the next months building something else, a writing residency for survivors of psychological identity theft, a quiet retreat, funded by donations and grants, where people could write themselves back into existence. The program's motto, printed on every notebook, no more mirrors, just windows. She taught a small class once a month. Not about craft, not about publishing, about voice. How to recognize when it's yours, how to nurture it, how to rebuild when someone else has tried to write you out of your own life. She didn't need to explain the pain. She just needed to remind people it could be rewritten. One day, while cleaning out a storage box from her old apartment, Sophia found something. A photo from that first date. The outdoor food market. James, no, he had asked a vendor to snap a picture of them together. She was smiling, genuine. He was next to her. Expression unreadable. She held it in her hands, stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, she tore it in half. Not violently, not with anger, just finality. One piece into the recycling bin. The other, her half, she pinned to her bulletin board. Because that moment, that version of her, she was real. Not because he saw her, because she kept going. The last time she wrote about him, she kept it short. Just 5 lines, handwritten on a card she slipped into the final notebook of her writing class. You tried to be my author. You wrote my fears in your font. You archived me like a secret. But I made myself public, and now I'm the one writing you out. Sophia didn't sign it. She didn't have to. They all knew who wrote it. And more importantly, they knew who he would never write again. If these stories send a chill down your spine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Got your own creepy dating tale? Drop it below, we just might feature it next. Stay safe out there. And remember, not all matches are meant to be.